I was enjoying a lovely evening of awards and dinner. The Southern California Regional Occupational Center Night of All-Stars. About a bunch of scholarships. Go Scrock. Yes, you know it's Scrock.
I've been here. Okay. I first with the Scrock. A lot of first with the Scrock.
Yeah?
Back in the 90s. A lot of people.
We'll have a new superintendent July 1st.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I'm on the board president right now.
A lot of people there. It's a good program.
Okay.
I have to log in here.
It's not logged in? Are you guys logged in?
I
am.
See if I can.
I don't know what happened. IT sets those up. Oh, my God.
That's what they always say.
It's not working?
No.
Can you turn it on? Or it's like
It's
the,
just, I need a password for 5.
you shouldn't need a password. Try it without a password and see if it goes in.
I have a pre-password.
No?
Typing the word password.
Not only we're not sure you have
Right there.
No, that's just the presentation. No,
Did it come on?
no, he wants the login screen.
See, they don't give me all that information.
Sure.
Let me see if I can propose somebody.
Position
That's position 5, right?
Position 5. Yeah.
Okay.
Microphones turned on yet?
They're not here.
Yeah, there it came.
Okay.
There it comes. Seconds and we'll start. You getting in?
I just text IT, so sorry about that. I don't know what else to tell you.
All right, everybody ready? We'll call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. Madam Clerk, may I have a roll call, please?
Okay, committee member Duiziak,
Present?
committee member Whittam,
Present.
committee member Morocco,
Present.
committee member Narayan,
Present.
committee member Pinsler,
Here.
committee member Kilroy,
Here.
Chair Stressenberg.
Here. Mr. Woodham, would you lead us in a salute to the flag, please?
Ready. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion and a second to approve the order of agenda?
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Blue folder items. Do we have any this evening? I don't believe we do. Okay.
Chair.
Consent calendar. We have 2 items. Anyone like to pull an item from the consent calendar?
I need to recuse myself on voting for the minutes since I wasn't here.
You can. You don't have to, but you can.
I think you should. If you're not in attendance, you shouldn't be voting on what the minutes are correct or not.
Well, the standard is that even if you're not in attendance, that the duty is to do it and review the meeting, but you don't have to.
Since we're discussing that, I wasn't here for the March 30th, but I did watch the.
And you're good.
I
Yeah,
understand.
there's actually a duty to vote.
This is transparency.
Yep, absolutely.
And I would like to pull the March 30, because I think I need more time to review it.
Okay, so can we pull just the March 30th from F2?
Sure.
Okay. Any others? Members of the public like to pull any item?
I have,
Right.
let's see, no Zoom and no e-comments.
Thank you. May I have a motion and a second to approve item F1 and the February 23rd, 23 minutes of item F2 only?
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Mr. Morocco, do you want to address the March 30th, or are you simply asking for more time?
I'm asking for more time to review it.
Okay.
Okay.
It's got a lot of comments with, plain statements as opposed to any substance. So I want to compare it to the actual broadcast.
Okay, so motion second to continue the approval of those minutes for March 30th, 2023 to the next regular meeting.
I'll make the motion, yeah.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
So that covers the excluded consent calendar items. We simply move those to the next regular meeting. Thank you for that. Public participation on non-agenda. This section is intended to provide members of the public with the opportunity to speak, comment on any subject that does not appear on this agenda for action. Limited to 30 minutes. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes. Do we have any E or Zoom?
No, none.
Seeing no members of the public wishing to speak, we can continue on from that. Beginning with item I1, which is continued from previous agenda, discussion of possible action regarding Article 11, Section 11.2 on the city attorney. So was there anything we're waiting for on that?
We're waiting for whoever was hired by the city to write the,
Right, the guy,
the,
person up in Grass Valley.
So is it clear that because I watched the meeting, but wasn't clear if it was actually getting sent?
well,
It was here. I mean, but Mike said last time he was gonna.
He was going to do it.
Okay,
It's not as time sensitive, so we let it go. And we're waiting for whatever the consultant who was hired to wordsmith the stuff that I had sent in.
yeah, and what was sent was the version that you created. You had both the red line and the hard copy, with the exception of putting back in the 2 final paragraphs. Is that correct? That were deleted, but you added those back in?
We had those back in, yes.
Okay.
When did we add them back in? Because when we left the meeting last time, they were deleted.
He said during the course of the meeting that he was including a backlink. That's what we voted on. I thought we took an actual vote on it.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. So we're just waiting for the,
Yeah, I think the city, let's see if I'll text the city attorney. We've been working on agenda today.
So I would move to table
He's.
this item to the next meeting.
I've got one more comment yet. As I've taken some time to read back through it, in the language, there was one thing that stood out to me that I believe was left in, is that the city,
Oh, here he is.
oh, did it go out? No?
Lorraine, if you can just restart the computer. Okay. And then just hit OK.
Oh, yours went down?
It should be right there.
In paragraph paragraph B, it talks about the city council, at the request of the city attorney, may employ other attorneys to assist in any litigation or other matter of interest. Is that something we would want to carry forward for an appointed city attorney, that they would have the exclusive right to bring in other counsel? It's subject to the approval, but right now, the only other counsel that can be brought in is by the city attorney.
this goes back to the question of, do you hire an individual or do you hire a firm? If you hire a firm, then by definition, they have multiple people who are working on a specific situation. If you hire an individual, then you may very well, but you have control over who the city attorney hires by the budgeting process. So
I agree with that to the extent that it would include the other people or other members within that firm, but I'm thinking if there's other firms that would be more appropriate for the council's, what the council was looking for, but the city attorney would have the exclusive domain yet of deciding who was, and they can't approve anything unless it's brought to them by the city attorney, is where I'm headed with that. So it would be that third party having exclusive right to determine who is even brought to city council for approval.
I'm not following your logic on that.
Okay, so we hire entity B, and maybe it's a firm with an individual.
We're talking as a city attorney or the consultant? That's where I'm getting confused.
Oh, this is with regards to the city attorney.
Okay.
Yeah, and the way the city charter is written.
Right, isn't that part of what we're trying to have the person wordsmith so we can address those?
But we didn't make any changes to that. It was sent as is. So if we, let me run through the example here. Entity B is hired appointed as the city attorney.
I think you may be misunderstanding the way I think this is
Okay.
written. The city council, at the request of the city attorney, may appoint other attorneys. That would mean that the city attorney comes to the council and says, I need more attorneys.
Yes,
And I think that's what that means.
it does. But who is selected is only at the.
No, it's not. All it says here is that the city council, at the request of the city, may employ other attorneys. They can employ other attorneys, no matter who they want. All the city attorney is saying, I need more attorneys.
The city council cannot choose their own.
If you go to a appointed city attorney, yes, you can.
It would be the appointed city attorney would be the only entity that could do the selection.
Why is that?
Not true.
Because the way it's worded and the way it works now, city council cannot simply go out and get its own selection for legal representation. It can only come through the office of the city attorney. That's the way it's written.
I don't think that's the way it's written at all.
Okay. Mr. Webb, would you answer a simple question for us? Can the city council, without your recommendation, hire any legal representation they wish?
So I'll answer as it's currently written for an elected city attorney. And it's designed to stop what has happened in some other cities that the council doesn't like the answer and therefore they go get a firm that they know will give them a contrary answer. So this is most consistent with an elected city attorney as opposed to an appointed city attorney. At the same time, I would argue with your use of the word exclusive because it's a balance. So if I want to use this, Joe Smith, the council can say, no, we're not going to hire Joe Smith. So it is both parties. The council can't use an end run to get someone who will give the advice they like. At the same time, the city attorney can't force a particular, attorney on them. And just so in practice, you'll see you have to reach a meeting of the minds. That may not be appropriate or it may be where you have an appointed city attorney because it depends on whether it's appointed individual or a firm. The appointed city attorney may not want to be undermined by, outside entities. So it's up to you to decide.
If I could, the way it exists now, you have a list of quote-unquote approved attorneys that are under some kind of agreement, contract, whatever it is with the city.
Correct.
If a city council decides, and the way I read this, if the city council decides, okay, you wanted me to give me this guy, on that list, I want to go to that guy.
It doesn't.
Be done.
No, it doesn't work that way. So the list is used because council is the least of who we hire. Like if we need to hire someone now, so
A broad range.
right, because staff may have a question about a specific answer. It's cheaper to have myself or one of our deputies do it. But there are 400 and something employees who all have questions and it will take too long. And there may be someone in that range who's a particular expert where we can go to someone on that list. For litigation, it's, you know, it's a specific range of, hey, any of these could be fine. I would recommend any of these, and the council can choose any of those that they think are appropriate.
Can a firm get on that list without your request or recommendation to city council?
It has to be approved by both. So it has to be my recommendation, and the council has to approve it.
Yeah, and that therein lies my concern of whether or not this is appropriate for, because right now, firms can do certain things better than others. That's why we have multiple firms. And the same thing, if we had an appointed, even if it was a firm, they're going to tend to navigate to their firm, which may or may not be in the best interest of the city. And this, the way this is written, and I think I'm reading it correctly, is it does require that the city attorney is the only one that can
recommend. It's all recommend.
And
use one of these three, whatever.
The council cannot do it without that recommendation.
Because the council then would be choosing a different legal opinion than the elected representative of the city. It may or may not make sense for appointed, because if you have firm A and then firm B, you know, they're all at the League of Cities, which, well, we're not at anymore, but typically they're all pitching their ideas. Some are better sales people than others. So if a council member, you know, wants to, hey, they're really good, I want to use them, and the city attorney, whether it be a firm or whether it be appointed, it's like, no, I know that they're not as good as any of these three. It might make sense to leave it in, but that's for you to decide. And you know, hopefully, Mr. Colantune will be present on the June 22nd meeting and can.
Does it make more sense what I'm trying to say, Bob?
I know what you're trying to say, but it's not what the document says.
I think it is what the document says.
It is a recommendation. There's no word recommendation in this chart. It's at the request of the city attorney.
And only at the request of the city attorney. There is no other method.
So if I can, so my request would be, it's not, we want attorneys. My request would be, I'd like to use this firm. I don't make the request, we need more attorneys. I make the request, hey, I need help for this litigation. I request one of these three attorneys. And so
I think we're
it'd be better to take it up with Colantuno in the context of whatever your recommendation.
Because I'm seeing, assuming that let's assume for a second that there's an appointed attorney, and you decide to go to a firm, and the RFQ goes out for the firms. What you'd be looking for is the breadth of capability of that firm.
But you can't get the entire breadth of the city within one firm.
Absolutely.
I totally disagree with that.
I totally disagree with that.
For the firms.
There's not what we use some really good firms. There's not one municipal firm that excels in energy commission proceedings and stopping a statewide power plant. And in that example, I couldn't get money from the council originally, and so I handled it through the initial stages of the proceeding, and then the council was persuaded that the energy wasn't needed and authorized me to find a different firms. That there aren't municipal firms that specialize in that. So there's some very good firms. There's some very good municipal law firms, but to say there's one firm that handles.
I understand.
Okay.
I'm talking about most of what is done. Specialization, true specialization like that. There are firms that specifically do that.
Right.
The way that this is written to me is that if that's the city attorney says, look, we need to go outside of this because we don't have this in our firm. Let's just, again, assuming appointed, then the council, as they do now, approves that.
And if that were the case, if that were the firm, they may in fact make the request, we need outside specialization, and they may not. But on the other hand, with this language, they could say, I know this other firm, I recommend you hire this other firm. And if this language is in there, then the council couldn't choose a third firm. So I think it's a better conversation for you to have with Colin Tuno, because I'm trying to answer
Okay, understood.
generally,
I know.
not
But I
withstanding
can-
my thoughts.
The example we have, which is currently pending, is no municipal law firm that I know of does bankruptcy work.
Right.
And you had to go out to get somebody who actually understands the process. So that, you needed to make that recommendation.
Right, exactly. And from my view, it depends on the makeup of the council. Now we have two attorneys, neither of which practices municipal law. And I think your attorney is in a better position to make a recommendation of a firm or two or three to the council. We have had councils that are very involved. We have councils that are not involved. As the council majority changes, I try and be aware of that and reflect what I think are their preferences in who I offer to the council, as long as I'm confident they can represent well the interests of the city.
So if one of the two attorneys came to you and said, hey, I know you're looking at bringing an attorney, here's somebody I recommend, you would do the research and figure out whether, okay, so they could still make a proposal to you, but you would actually have to vet them.
Yeah, so for example, we just brought back last week, because we're still short an attorney and we have a lot of real estate. Since we got control of our waterfront, we have a lot of opportunities to extend leases. And when we were in this position before, we were looking for real estate attorneys. Real estate attorneys are pricier than municipal law attorneys. So I knew someone, the assistant city manager at the time knew someone, and the waterfront director. And so I brought all three in. We interviewed all of them. I thought they were all qualified, could all do the work, and the assistant city manager's person had just left a big firm to go to San Luis Obispo and offered a 50% discount on his rates. So I chose the person recommended, by the assistant city manager. If a council said, hey, what do you think about this firm? I'd interview them. I wouldn't necessarily choose them, but I'd certainly, I'd look for whoever is the best qualified to do that specific representation. And you also have to factor out how much will it cost the city and how much is at stake if the city is
But
were to lose.
my reading of this is the only path to having another firm or attorney
is upon
retained by the city.
is
It
upon
must be.
joint
But it
agreement
first
of-
has to be at the request of the city attorney.
Right, and
It
it's
can't get to the city council any other way.
But it's upon the joint agreement. It
It is.
Right.
If the first does not agree,
Absolutely.
it doesn't happen.
Right.
And just as the council can say, no, we're not going with
I
that
would
firm.
agree that that's the procedure. It's not what's written.
I think it's what's written.
You guys are missing one important point. The council controls the money. You're gonna appoint anybody you want.
Well, see, and that's
Council
why,
doesn't vote to fund it. It's not gonna happen.
and that's why I, did the first part of the proceedings opposing the AES power plant repowering, because there wasn't the money. And so it's like, and that's always the choice. If the council doesn't want to use an outside firm for a case, then okay, I'll try it. That's not a problem. The problem will be there are only so many hours in the day, and then all the other 432 employees, when they want to get a contract through and everything else, that tends to be delayed. So whether you want to have a requirement that both agree versus only the council can choose, in whatever form of appointed you recommend, that's up to you to decide.
So I bring forth, in that example, I bring forth the language in another city charter that says, but the city council shall have control of all legal business and proceedings and may employ other attorneys to take charge of any litigation matter or to assist the city attorney therein.
Well, in your language, remember last time that the first language that you had, Committee Member Pinsler, you had said you thought they were the same, and I just looked at it, it's like, no, it's different. And you, that was one of those differences. Now, I'm going to stop talking because you're talking about something that I don't want you to choose something because of something I say,
No,
and then I attack it, and you go, oh, well, that you led us that way. I really wanted to stay
For
away
future
from that.
consideration, I am concerned.
We'll talk to Michael when he gets it.
I'm concerned about the way it's written now and the implications of that, because it can be read. I think we've agreed that it is a two-step, and if the first step doesn't happen, the city council has no choice. They can't make a choice of their own.
This is not the only place in the charter where it's ambiguity.
Understood, but I'm only addressing this one right now. And I'm looking at other charters, there is specific language that says the control remains with the city council.
It always does because they have the money.
Well, but even aside that's the second tier of it. I agree, but so consideration for where do we want that control to really lie?
Good question for Mike.
Okay. Other than that, appreciate all your efforts that you put into it.
We have
And
another issue, though.
Yes.
Attached to this, is that we have a qualification to be a city attorney. All right? All right. If you allow the city council to be, I'll just say, picking the city attorneys, how come that qualification doesn't apply to the city council? As Mr. Webb just pointed out, there are two lawyers on the council right now. Neither of them practice municipal law. So how is the council going to make an informed legal opinion on who is best qualified to represent the citizens?
If I can answer that.
Please.
City council is essentially the client. So it's just like any other client interviewing people. You resolve all these problems by pulling out the whole section of a city attorney.
But I would argue that the people of Redondo Beach are the client.
Not with an appointed one.
No, well,
And we'll get to that when we talk about.
I'm not
my
doing
job.
appointed one.
What?
If the people are the client, why aren't they involved in client-attorney privilege?
I give up.
The council isn't the client, the people aren't the client, it's the city structure on the civil side that is the client. And so if it's the highest level, so if it is, and I've given this example before, but if a department head wants to fire an employee, then the department head is the highest level, and I represent department head. City manager wants to fire a department head. City manager is the hiring authority. I represent the city manager. If the council wants to fire the city manager, I represent the council. If there's any interaction between a citizen or resident and something that the council has done, I'm obligated to defend any employee, any officer. If a city councilman violates the law and it's not a felony, it's my obligation to prosecute the city council.
Okay.
So it isn't any of those things. We've had situations where publicly there's been discussion of a city councilman demanded the city represent him for actions on the
I think we're
weekend.
good for now.
Okay, but that's like, if you want the council to be in charge of that, then that may not be in the city's best interest. And it is the city that's the client on the civil side. It is the people of the state of California and not the city of Redondo Beach that's the client on the prosecution side.
In the materials, there's something from Jared Goddard when he was the city attorney talking about the hierarchy of who the client is. And it's worth reading.
Yeah, and you can look at the League of California Cities, it's the same thing. So it depends who actually you're interacting with, but it is the city on the civil side, the municipal corporation, and whoever is designated to make decisions for the municipal corporation in this specific instance, but it's the people of the state of California. When someone's charged with DUI or stealing somebody's car, we bring them on their behalf. And that's why, to me.
Okay, we're good. Yeah, let's not go any further with that.
So I do, and one other thing, on the Long Beach model, I did talk to Doug Halbert, the Long Beach City prosecutor. He is willing to speak at one of your meetings. He cannot do it on June 22nd. And when I spoke to him, I didn't have your July and August dates available. So go ahead.
I think Rolf and Weezer brought up the speed. The question was about whether or not there should be a city prosecutor position and whether that in fact should be elected.
Well, I understand. I watched the video and I knew the history on that, but that never got brought forward to go.
We actually talked about bringing this Long Beach prosecutor.
Right, but in the meantime, we sent language to the outside counsel to be reviewed of what was decided to be.
Right, and that was sent. So this is, I'm segueing in, so that was sent to him. I gave the date of today as preferable, but your next meeting was June 22nd. And then with Doug Halbert, I indicated I'd reach out to the Long Beach City prosecutor. He will speak to you, whereas, Torrance early on had declined. And so he'll speak to you, but I don't know if July or August. And then I'll follow up with a conversation, have a conversation once that date is selected to see if the separate Long Beach City attorney can. I did confirm that if you go that way, the Long Beach City attorney is paid more than the city prosecutor. And it was fixed at a set period of time, and then they get equal costs of living. And they have a city attorney, a city prosecutor.
Understood.
And
that's all fine. In the meantime, we've sent language, ballot language, to be analyzed, correct?
No, not ballot language. Not ballot language.
The background, the way that the charter might be amended.
To the end of,
The consultant.
right, but the only option in what was sent was to move to an appointed, correct? That's what was sent.
That was discussed because we don't have to write for the elected, we haven't elected. So.
And that's what we voted on way back when.
Right, so that brings me to the discussion of the dual elected. Is that still under consideration?
We were looking for more information, which is what we had requested.
Because it feels like
We
we've
haven't
moved ahead.
presented it with any information yet. We
So
just heard this thing out there.
I forgot, you were not at the last meeting. So,
But I've watched it.
okay,
But that's on-
so that was.
even watching it, I'm not clear.
Okay, that was the specific recommendation, I think, of Councilmember Brandt, and then
I've seen that.
Councilmember Obaji said, hey, any
watched that.
model. And last time the committee decided, all right, we'd had the language from Committee Member Pinsler. He updated it last time, which basically our
Understood.
current language and removing elected from it. And the committee voted to move that forward to Mr. Colantuno because you still needed to do more work to see whether you wanted to favor some other model or the Long Beach model, or no, you were just going to go with that model. But you had already
Understood.
done.
So it could
the
come
work.
back to where, in a future decision, after hearing more input, a couple months from now, that we send yet again another version,
Correct.
and that's the intent here.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I want to make sure.
That was the intent, to
Just explore.
discuss
So
this
what's
whole
been sent is,
prosecutor issue as to whether that should be a separate thing, because obviously we've talked about the dual role of the city attorney and separating out prosecutor versus a city attorney who doesn't have experience in prosecution. That was the background of it.
okay. And that's, just wanted to clarify that we have moved ahead to what is really a final step on one.
Semifinal
If
step.
we chose that option.
Okay, a semifinal step, but-
First option, we both change our decisions.
Right, which may end up being just wiped clean.
Might very well.
Okay.
Well, and keep in mind, the task for Mr. Colantino was you had sample, not language, but you had simple charter amendment language. And I pointed out, just as one example, because I'm not doing this, you want to remove other language as well, because you don't want to have conflicting language in there.
But all that would change yet again if there was a future decision.
There's another place where it lists 3 people as being elected.
Right.
If you take out the elected, you've got to change that at the same time.
Understood,
There are
understood.
pieces, strewn throughout this
Right, I
document.
understand all that, but all of that,
We're still exploring options.
it's-
That's what, where we're at.
okay.
Or you say
That's
multiple
what I wanted to-
modalities.
Well,
I'd like a discussion about
Confirm.
coming up.
Modalities.
Well, and you've got more time given their direction. So you've got, it's on the, 2026.
You don't need to drag it out unnecessarily, though.
Well, no, but you get, 2026 elections, so you're not hurried through, but you do have a deadline of coming back to them, I think, by November. And so that's why I'm trying to keep it on a, if Colantino is on the June, I'll try and get someone for your July meeting and someone for your August meeting, and then you can decide if you want new language. As I've mentioned, if both were elected, I don't know, because I don't know enough about it, if I favor it,
Okay,
but I
we'll get
would
there.
be, please let me finish. I really don't interrupt you.
I don't think we need,
Let's finish. He's got half a sentence left.
Yes. So I can do the ballot language and the charter amendment language if you're splitting them but leaving both elected. I don't have a conflict. The clerk and I won't be writing the ballot argument against, so I can do the impartial analysis. That's what I was saying.
that's all future.
Correct. But I'm saying we have time to get it done by November because of that.
The other discussion I've heard quite a bit is about when this could or would actually go to ballot. Can you please provide to us a written text, provide the applicable law that states when these can and cannot in written format? What law says when they can go to which ballot?
So watch the council meeting that you were at.
I'm asking just, yeah.
No, I'm not going to repeat the work. So, and the clerk did a good job of directing you to the election code. And your motion from the council was any election will be on the November general election in 2026 regarding the city attorney and take effect April 1st, 2029. Conversely, if you make any changes to the treasurer position or the city clerk to avoid the
That's all
same
fine.
issue, you want to get that on the November 2024 election if it is a change in status. So you could change things in terms of the office, but it's where it's a change in status that it's not eligible to be on any other election other than the November general
And all that's
election.
being requested is copies of the law that describes all and prescribes all that. Can you provide that?
Yes.
Understanding that if this is going to be a 2026 election, you won't be doing it anyway because you're not going to be the city.
I am definitely not running,
So
no matter what.
be dealing with somebody else.
Yeah, but as I pointed out last time, my goal is to get something to the council so they can make the decision of which election they want to
Which is
put
mine
on.
as well.
But they've done that already.
Well,
And so that's the only reason I'm pausing on this.
Council
Because there's
changes.
not there, but, well, and if they change, then that would be an
But
appropriate
you've
request
agreed
for
you will
you.
provide that to us.
I've provided it before. The clerk has provided it before.
The written copies to us?
No, I can get the minutes from the council meeting and provide you that, because that sort of spells out why we're not having the city attorney for the 2024, because we're going to be in nominations when this
No, that's-
election.
yeah, that-
Excuse me?
I'm just asking for copies of the law that spells that out.
And how
That's all
does
I'm
that
asking for.
fit, how does that fit within your mission as a charter, like, are you second guessing the council decision back whenever?
It's all because of the city of Bell.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was literally it.
Yes.
No, just asking to see it.
Okay, yes, I will provide that.
When can you do that by?
Your next meeting.
Very good. Thank you. All, just whatever law applies to what charter amendments, city charter amendments can be placed on what ballots.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I move to table this to the next meeting then?
Table what?
This item I-1 to the next meeting.
Second.
Yes, to continue it. Yep.
Yes. Same thing.
Okay, there's a motion second to continue this to the next meeting. And at that next meeting, we'll have that documentation.
I
And
hope
is there
so.
anything else that's pending to,
And we'll have Michael.
he will be joining at that meeting?
Yeah, I hope to. I give this date and the June date, so
Okay,
I don't want to promise him, but hopefully.
so we are continuing, but I wanted, what are we specifically looking for at that meeting?
Yeah, it would be, hopefully, ideally, it'd be Colin Tuno giving you, and as soon as I get the report, I'll give it to the clerk and she can email it to all of you. And then he'll be here via Zoom to answer questions, again, about the language only. You have to decide what you want to do, but he can debate, he can answer the questions. Is this the best language for whatever option that the majority of the committee is choosing?
Okay. So there's a motion second to continue with the hopes of having that individual here, any other discussion we might want to have, and the written copies of the applicable law to when things can be placed on the ballot.
It's 2 election code sections that apply.
Just copies of that.
And public comment.
And public comment on this item? Thank you.
We have none.
Okay. So there's a motion and a second to continue with those things. This item, they're all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, tabled, or not tabled, continued, I'm sorry.
And just to
Yes.
clarify, the next meeting is June 22nd, right?
That's what I have. Yes.
Okay, so the agenda then is wrong with the date of the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on to I2, discussion of possible action regarding Article 11, Section 11.1, City Treasurer. Mr. Pinsler, your name is here.
Yeah, this is actually awaiting Gene's response. So I think we should
Just continue.
just continue.
Okay, want to make that motion?
The motion to continue to the next meeting.
I'll second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
You
Passes
still have to
unanimously.
ask for public
I did not
comment.
ask for public comment.
Yeah, none.
When we're just simply continuing, I guess we still should, yeah.
We still have to.
Okay, very good.
None.
Okay.
Item, section J, items for discussion prior to action. Discussion and possible action regarding the possibility of removing RBUSD School Board from the city charter as directed by City Council. My name is on that. So we have discussed this. The reason we had put this to this meeting was to give the school board itself a chance to weigh in on any thoughts they may have on this. It has been discussed at 2 meetings now. First one was really more of an introduction and letting the other school board members know what this entails, where the city charter says things, what other school boards around us do, just the general, let them get a feel for it. The last meeting got into a little bit more detail. The summary of that is that we're still waiting for information as to what it would cost the district, because currently I believe there is no cost to the school district for school board elections. Is that correct?
Correct.
It's just simply grandfathered into
Correct.
the general election of Redondo Beach. So that was a concern that is still waiting to be responded to. We're seeking that information. In general, it would move to a November even year election cycle, which is what most do. It can be different from that. I believe there's a few that are in June. But that would be a decision of the school district if it were to come out of the charter.
So you're saying June, so 1 year it's June, the next year is March, just to be clear.
Okay, so it's a springtime, and is it every 2 years like that, or because?
Yeah, every
Presidential
two,
years in March and
So-
non-presidential is June.
correct. So
Very good. As to all of the other factors, we have discussed them pertaining how would this affect the at-large versus by trustee area. I explained that that's what originally was brought forth from this committee to the council with respect to moving from at-large to by trustee area and the reasons for that. It was a 6-1 to vote. Reminding everyone that went for our new members, that went to council. Council's recommendation was go back and talk about and consider simply taking it out of the city charter, which we had not considered. We have learned since then that certainly that can be done. It can be anywhere from leaving it to where it's at right now, or even adding more to it if there was a predilection to do that, or on the other extreme, just taking it out completely, which it does not, nothing has to be in the city charter regarding the school district. And anything that does, and any or all that does come out of the city charter then falls to Ed Code. And Ed Code has provisions for all of this. Election code may play into it too, but taking it out of the city charter does not leave the school district just hanging with nothing. It reverts to other law, which would then need to be followed. It was also discussed that coming completely out of the charter would eliminate, at least for the time being, the term limits that are in there. The school board understands that in order to reinstate those, I believe it would have to go to a vote of the people again on a separate ballot measure. There was also some talk of potentially moving it to 3 terms rather than 2, just as discussion. There was not any, at least with this board, movement towards no term limits as a permanent solution. Nobody really liked that idea, but it was understood that the term limits would have to be, if we wanted them, would have to be put back in by a vote of the people. School board cannot simply do that. And at that time, we would decide, is it 2 term limits still what is desired? Would it move to 3 for some reason and justify that? But that would be up to the school district. There was no strong feeling in either direction. There was more of we'd still like to find out how much it's going to cost us, just, to know that information, and a general consensus of if we stay in, fine. If we come completely out, fine. Any of those can work.
Sounds like the old city council meetings.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's my overview summary of where we're at, and that's what I told them I would bring to this committee. That
I don't recall if I actually submitted the document that I did in my check of the school board in charters, or did I just send it to you?
I think you gave it to us, at least a listing of it.
To the new members, this is another one where Redondo Beach is somewhat of a unicorn, in that of all the cities that have charters, only 10 of them even mention the school board. And of those, most of them mentions are, yeah, we've got a school board. And that's basically it. So there was one, I can't remember the city that made it so that there was no compensation, which is another issue that's in the charter now that our school board could fix, is to get some
change of their own volition, but they can't do it now.
It's out of the charter, you can do whatever you want. But for the most part.
That's the problem.
Well, it may very well be. But the problem. They're elected officials, they can get rated in that way. But it's unusual for charter cities to have this kind of control over a school board. So that was the rationale behind, well, do it on your own, it's yours. So if they don't want to do it, then it's fine, that's but this was your school board's decision, basically. Whatever they wanted, I think we would try to meet.
You're a school board too.
So my question is,
Well, I meant he's a member of.
you've referred to ed code and everything like that. I haven't seen it. I'd love to see the provisions that relate to what would be filling in the vacuum if we removed it. Our city, despite its charter, is still an incorporated body. So I don't know, again, if you would have to get separate incorporation for the school board. So it's a recognizable corporate entity, and that ties in with bonds. You know, how can they issue bonds if they're not? So I would love to be able to see the ed code sections that talk about what happens if you don't have something that provides the corporate structure that our charter and in fact our city itself being a corporate entity would do. So I think I need some more information to understand.
Do we want to go to that extent? Because how ed code is dealt with and the options within ed code is really up to the school board. But you're saying you'd want to.
But if we propose to get this out of the charter, I think we have an obligation to figure out what structure is going to be in its place. And I don't have enough information to.
You have to understand what the structure currently is for other districts. Like that, what ed code currently states. It gives an example of what we could see, or what we could do in the future.
Because if we pull this out of the charter and they can't operate without being a separate corporate entity.
Yeah, that won't happen.
Well, I don't know that. That's why I want to see the section so I can figure out if we.
I believe we have a legal question here, Mr. Webb. Would the school board would the school district cease to exist? Or?
I just want to know actually what will happen in another scenario. Like what replaces this our code here?
If I could, the number of cities.
Can you guys put your mics on? I just realized some of your mics are off.
They don't seem to want to.
Yours is on, Mark.
Yours was on, but you had shut it off.
Oh, welcome aboard, Matt.
That's why.
It's annoying because you can't see the doggone red light. And when he did it, I could see it. And
Whatever.
there it is.
There you go. Okay. The way that charters that have the school board in it state is there's a school board and it's responsible for, under the education code, its structure.
Right.
And that's it.
But even that is not necessary.
It's not really necessary because most of the charters don't have it at all. But so the school board exists and it is a separate entity.
Exists, yeah.
The school
And the board
district exists. And so you could literally just change this whole section 16 to say, yeah, school board exists. A school district exists.
Or we don't even have to say
You
that.
don't even have to say that.
If you don't say it, then you may not have a corporate entity. If you want to do bonds.
Not a corporate
at some
entity.
point.
The school
I think
district
you're-
exists.
What's your authority to say it exists? Other than the charter says it exists. If you pull it out of the charter, what is there in the ed code that says that this entity exists? It's a loose association, which may not have any of the powers such as, again, floating bonds, which they can do.
They do have that.
They do have it because it's part of this charter.
It's not in the charter.
So if I may,
please.
the answer is none of us know exactly because none of us have researched it. What I will say is there are parts of what you're saying that, so I haven't researched what happens if they don't exist. But what I have researched is, they exist under our charter because the South Bay Unified School District, which I attended in my youth and went to Aviation High School when it existed, was replaced by the Redondo Beach Unified School District, and its boundaries are exactly the same as the city, which is the only reason that the city charter can control it. If they had added Maricosta, which is just across the street, then that couldn't be controlled by our charter. So there is a question in my mind as to what would have to happen, although I haven't researched it, to create a separate entity. What if 3/5 of the school board want to, we want to, we want a different configuration. And so I don't know. However, even though they're in our charter, they're only in our charter for limited purposes. They're only in the charter for how the members of the Board of Education get chosen. how long, that they have
How
term
many members?
limits, how many members, the fact that they can get reimbursed for expenses but not get paid, which is allowed under the education code. On the other hand, if they're dealing with anything that has to do with educational purposes, then the ed code trumps any contrary city law. So for example, we have a leaf blower ban, which was ironically passed at the initiation of students who were complaining about air pollution from the leaf blowers on the high school campus. They're not subject to the leaf blower ban. If they're building educational facility, which includes football stadium or bleachers, they don't have to get any city building permits. However, if they wanted to build something and rent it out, then they have to apply. So it's a very complex thing. I'll look at, although I have not, what would happen or what would need to be done, in order for them, if they cease to exist, it may be that they then could, do the steps contained in the education code to become a corporate entity. But I don't know that it would just be simply, okay, it's the same that continues as is without looking at it. So if the majority of the committee wants me to, we'll research that. I'm sorry.
With the old district, in the charter before, like the elementary school district, was that also in here?
No, see, it's the South Bay Unified, it was
I remember that.
three cities. And so you had Aviation, Maricosta.
But you have this.
Well,
We had
there were four
elementary.
districts.
Well, an elementary
There
district.
were four districts. One was a high school district.
Right.
That was dissolved by a vote of the people.
Right.
All right? And the high schools were split up amongst two districts because Hermosa wasn't capable of, I'll just say, funding it, all
For
right?
purposes of where we're at now, the question
No,
is.
so each one of those must have been a corporation because they do bond. I mean, and there's no bond attorney in the world that's going to recommend, say, hey, so what we don't know is what they are legally. City of Redondo Beach is a corporation. Are they a corporation? Or are they just some entity under the ed code?
Well, and they probably are, but they are pursuant to the charter. And so the question is, once that's removed, what needs to be done? I'm certain that they will continue to exist, but only if certain steps are taken. And what I hear from Committee Member Morocco is you don't know that you necessarily want to go down that path if you don't know what needs to be done for those things to happen.
Or, pardon me for interrupting, or so that when we put it on the ballot, we can explain it to the people exactly what we're doing. Right. I mean, that's more important.
So when we get to that point, we will want to have addressed that. But for now,
Isn't
I
that
would
the
say-
point, isn't that the point of what we're doing?
Yeah, but exact point.
I'm sorry.
I think the point of what we're doing is coming to a recommendation of which direction does this body want to recommend to City Council to have happen. I would say that no matter what that direction is, it's doable.
I would agree that it's doable. The real question is, when we present it, are we putting a veil across it, and is the wizard sitting behind it, pulling the levers? Or are we going to present something that says, okay, we now have a school district, it's in the charter, and this is the ramifications. I'm actually really talking to the arguments either for or against, all right? So just assume we put on the ballot, do we want to remove the school district? Do we know enough right now, from this discussion, we don't know enough about the school district and what the ramifications are of taking them out of the charter. The people know now that they can vote for, guess what?
Okay, so
The school board
let's say
electeds.
for now, we leave it in the charter to the point that you gave the example earlier. Leave the point in that the city, that Redondo Beach Unified School District exists.
This is the cart before the horse. The issue to me is, we have said to the school district, what do you want us to do?
And the
Do
school,
you want us to remove you, or do you not want us to remove you? If there's a requirement for us to have a statement in the charter that says the school board exists
we can do that.
via con Dios, then it's fine with us. So it's up to the school board to make this decision. If they don't want to do it, then we just go away and not do anything.
And the school
Up to the
board
school board.
has basically, at this point,
Boiled it down to money.
well, not even that. They've kind of kicked it back and saying, we're okay either way, whatever you guys decide. It's the essence of it.
Well,
And
can we-
I know it's
Back in.
well,
who makes the decision. Ultimately, what we had sought was the school board's input,
Right.
but it is this body's decision of what recommendation to make
The school board
To
doesn't
the
see it.
council.
to the
We have to
council.
be presenting it to the council with the full explanation of the reasons and what the ramifications are.
Well, and the other thing is, what are the advantages and disadvantages? What are you seeking to achieve? Because you also, there's a middle ground, which is you can propose in the charter whatever it is you're seeking to change. If you're seeking to change
Yeah,
the
it can
term
be any
limits
part
or
of it.
seeking to change the pay, all of those you could put on the ballot to achieve if you want to, because as I mentioned again, as I mentioned before, residents care a lot about local control. And if they're taken out of the charter, they lose that local control if the state legislature changes the ed code. Whereas if they go, if they leave it in the charter, even summarily, and they don't like something, the residents don't like something that the state legislature allows in the education code, then they can amend the charter, again, to control that. But I think you have to know why you're proposing it. Everything you've voted on up till now, there's been a consensus of you all of the reasons behind it. And I think it would be to identify those reasons, and then you can make the appropriate, but I'm hearing the end game and not the why.
Exactly.
So one of the whys would be to separate the city and the school district with regard to any legal action concerning a change from at-large to by trustee area. And there's multiple avenues for that. It can be a lawsuit against, if it's only under the realm of the district, this lawsuit is only against the district. If it's in the charter, that lawsuit would name the city as well. It would have to.
Because we would have to change our charter.
Correct. So it brings the city into that realm of being sued, should that happen. The other way that can happen is the LA committee can mandate this, and that one is still
Well, we wouldn't get
under
sued.
challenge with Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District. At this point, I've watched what I think are the most recent proceedings. It is moving ahead for them to go to by district. However, they threw in the wrench of they're splitting Santa Monica Malibu into two separate school districts. So the argument from legal counsel was, don't establish new districts for Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District, because in a year or two that will no longer exist, and you would simply have to start all over again and redistrict those now two separate entities. So but when you watch it, it looks as if it is going to happen, because they have not won that case. And I believe at the appeal level, and I'm not clear on all this, but at the appeal level, it basically got stalled.
So what it was is the court ruled that even though it was, as written ordinance, that they needed to let the school district in the city of Santa Monica needed to let the county commission finish its work. And then the lawsuit can resume. So there hasn't been a finding on the merits. We wouldn't get dragged into the lawsuit. The council may choose to sue if a county commission were designed to do that. And there's a lot of misunderstanding by the county. So for example, one of the things that the commission discussed that you all put on the ballot or recommended to the council and they put on the ballot was ranked choice voting. Now, notwithstanding the fact that it doesn't apply to the school district, the county commission had a discussion about how often school districts are using ranked choice voting as an end run around district by district elections. And so I don't even understand the rationale of that. And they didn't even bother to look that it didn't apply. What you recommended and what the voters approved didn't apply to the school district. There's still a discussion of Redondo. On the other hand, as we've discussed and the clerk provided all the demographics, we really should win that lawsuit because we don't have an identifiable demographic in any of the current districts that votes as an identifiable voting block.
Ranked choice doesn't apply in a multiple person election.
Yeah, it made no sense. I'm just pointing out they're looking for ways to set it up. So I don't think we get sued. I think they would just go ahead and force you to go to districts, and you do have greater protection if you don't want that by being in a charter than you do. What?
Maybe.
Well, you have greater. I don't know if it's enough, but you do have greater.
Yeah.
There's no maybe. It may not win, but
Agreed.
you do have greater protection. And the clerk has indicated that the cost of an election, if it's by district and the county runs it, could be substantially different, much higher than if you're at large. And so that's, again, a factor. But all those things are things that you can discuss, but it's like, what problem are you trying to solve by removing it from the charter or leaving it in the charter under certain terms, whether it be just, okay, there's a, or if you want to change specific things, you allow them to be paid or have 3 terms or any other item, but it depends the why.
I haven't researched this, but it's been indicated that if it is taken out of the charter, the school district could no longer utilize ranked choice voting, only under the charter.
Ranked choice voting with multiple person elections. It doesn't happen because you don't need 50%. The only reason for ranked choice voting is to get to 50%.
There's arguments that it still can be used.
It's idiotic.
But that's an opinion. There are opinions that go the other way.
Yeah, I wasn't defending. I'm just saying, hey, this is weird that they're talking about our ranked choice voting in something that doesn't even apply, let alone it was, it's an end run.
I just want to state that's been brought forth as a consideration that if the election specification comes out of the charter and falls to ed code, ranked choice voting for the school district could not be utilized, is my understanding.
Ranked choice voting can't be utilized in a multiple person election because the idea for ranked choice voting is to get to 50%. And there's no 50% requirement in.
You'll get arguments against that. I'm sorry, you will. Go, Ms. Morocco.
So I see there's still 3 things besides the ed code sections that come into play. You said that the school board doesn't have a preference one way or another.
Does not.
So if
at this time,
if the option is to keep this in the charter, are there provisions that they would want to change in the charter sections or language? And get their opinion on that. That was the first point. My second point, the continuing education school, that's, as I understand it, under the school district, but the only jurisdiction for it goes through grade 12. So maybe we need to actually look at whether we need to expand that to all public education, the language, because it only goes through kindergarten through 12th grade.
Well, now we have TK as well, so that's.
But that's something that we may want to look at as well when we're evaluating the options. And then we had a number of amendments in the, on this Article 16, and I'd be interested to see what was being proposed during those amendments. So if we have the ballot proposals for, like when they went to the term limits, 97, if we can get something that would give us some information about why they made the amendments when they did.
Okay, and I would just kind of follow all this up with going back to, it was council's recommendation to take it back to us for discussion for removal. They wouldn't have made that recommendation if there was not an inclination on their part to do
I was
that.
driven by two former school board members who were on the city council saying so. So I think that's one of the reasons we're doing this.
One of them said that she just didn't understand why it was still there. So that's, I would think, part of our education process, to come back to the council and say, this is why it's there and this is why, it should be there. I don't know if Mr. Lowenstein said any position one way or another. I don't remember. I was at that meeting too, but one way or the other on it. So.
I recall him saying it sounded like a good idea, but.
Yeah.
Well, and I think they wanted to find out what the school board wanted. I think there was discussion also about the school board had wanted, when SB 9 was passed, they wanted to move to June or November, I forget which one, and submitted, what?
November.
To November, and submitted a request to the county. And then we asked them to put it on hold so we wouldn't have to sue the school district and the county on our SB 9 lawsuit, and we won, not SB 9, SB 415. And when we won, then that stopped. So I don't know if there's any desire to move it to a different day, but that could go along with then who pays for it. Supposedly, I don't know if the school district would pay for it or if the city in its charter requires it. Theoretically, the city would still have to pay for the election.
If we were to take out the section that prescribes it's under the March election.
Yeah. And that's one thing. If they wanted to do, that's something that could be done. It may make sense for them to be on a different date because, the school year is different.
I think you're hearing the reason why most charters don't have this.
Because it gets into all these things, yeah.
But again, it means the voters have control over it, and the voters of our city, not the state legislature. So you keep saying that, like, yeah, most don't. Well, Redondo is different, but Redondo, you have to look at, are there good reasons why is Redondo better?
There's a story in every article of this.
He's heard that speech from me before.
Okay.
My 2 cents, if the school district has to pay for an election, they'd want to stay with the status quo. Anything they can do to shift costs to the city, they're all over it. So,
Makes sense.
I can't imagine them wanting to change something and then foot the bill for an election.
Well, and particularly because, as we've learned from SB 415, we saved the city a lot of money because the county, now that they don't have competition, is jacking up the cost for all the cities that put it on a primary or November ballot. So the cost, and it could really soar if you have to go to districts.
At the same time, didn't the independent entities that we engage, a lot of them disappeared?
Well, they did, but what she does now is she subcontracts out pieces of it.
Correct. There's three 3 cities that do the same thing.
So you found a reasonable
Oh, yeah.
workaround that,
4 cities, excuse me, 4 cities. One of the cities, City of Whittier, actually developed a software to, that has all our voters and signatures, and it's beautiful. And so then we have someone else who creates the ballots, just the printing for the voter guides and the ballots, and then we have someone else who comes here and tabulates the ballots. And then.
and if an election is moved to November under a general election run by the county, can you even have your own options, or must be with the county?
Well, if you're going to do it the same time with the county, you want to do it with the county because you're going to get confusion from the voters if you're doing 2.
Oh, you just have separate ballots
Yes.
coming out,
Right.
okay.
Exactly.
So essentially the choice is,
And different envelopes, because we had that issue in October. We had that October 19th election.
so if it comes out, it's going to move to county. If it goes to November or even a springtime election,
June or March,
it's
yeah.
going to move to county. And that will be, as you said, fairly subject to whatever costs they want to charge.
Right.
Okay. And that's that is the one point that has been asked, and the school district administration is trying to check into that with county, trying to get an answer. County doesn't like to answer things like that, I would imagine, so.
Well, right now they have the calculation for the March election. So that's viewable at this time. So you put in the information in there and it calculates their estimate. Now, it's an estimate,
The March election?
the March 2024.
Yeah, primary.
Oh, got it.
I'm sorry.
Statewide.
Yep, sorry.
Yeah, March.
March 2024.
So how much was it?
Oh, I didn't.
You don't even want to do it anymore.
Well, yeah. Yeah, because I'm going to do one for the November because we're going to look like we're having a November for the city clerk and the city treasurer. So I'll be looking at that when it comes out. It's not out yet. To see what it's going to cost.
So I get that you want to see whatever the school board wants to do, and the school board is, at this point, I think it's overwhelmed them a bit. It's a lot of information for them to take in, even after 2 meetings, so needs further consideration. Well, no, yeah, I told them we weren't going to come to conclusion tonight, and they were asking, is that enough information to send back? I said, at this point, it is. And city council has charged us with this exercise to do this and make the recommendation. We wanted to, as I said, get the input from the school board. Appreciate your request for further clarifications. Those are justified. But
Do we have the same time pressures or lack of on this
it would
issue?
fall to the same voting cycle as city attorney
Okay.
for the next round. But they're on it every 2 years, so at some point, it's going to, the next one will be the 2025 for 3 seats.
Oh, you mean the March election? Okay.
Under the current
Yeah,
March election,
So I
yeah.
I
So
thought you were talking
having
about
it-
November 2026. That's
Yeah, I think what you're asking, the November 2024 would not work particularly well, but for the same reason it was stated that it wouldn't work well for the city attorney, because in that time.
Every 2 years.
But in November 2024, we'll be waiting on results while we have people filing to run.
Every 2 years, we're not talking about an individual job. We're talking about a regular rotation. So every 2 years, you've got the same problem.
Right.
So you've got to figure out an off year, an odd number year in November to run this question.
There isn't one.
No, you can run anytime in an off year.
There's only even year November.
No, November.
You can do March, June.
It only impacts
Any-
the
any year.
effective date
Or I
of
think
it. It
March.
doesn't impact the
Any
actual
year you can do
resolution.
it. There
Yeah,
are
it depends on what,
potential election days.
for the school board, because you have, for that section, it has to do with benefits. That's why it's the city clerk and the city treasurer and the city attorney. It's related to benefits. It affects the position. So I'm not sure if,
Well, to put it on the ballot for November 2024,
Right,
would be problematic.
correct.
We had an election in October. We can do it any time we want.
A special election for
Sure.
charter, yeah, we could.
For this, yes,
Right. Okay.
I believe.
That would be,
don't know.
Actually, with charter thing, maybe not. Charter things, maybe not.
I'd have to look.
Mhm.
on that.
Okay. I move we continue this after public comment to the next meeting so you can get more data, or do you think 2 months will be more important, more efficient?
I would, at this point, I'm not sure how I would take it back to school board. Is it?
Does the
it's
school board
kicking-
meet during the summer?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's not a problem.
Yeah, and we have continued it to the next meeting,
Okay.
which will be coming up. It's twice a month in general.
I was just asking if there was a logistical issue with meetings.
But what I would take back to them at this point is where we have no
We're
recommendation.
waiting for your input. Really, that's what we're doing.
Understood. And the input has been, we have no input.
Okay, then it goes away.
Although, again, if they are inclined to keep it in the charter, they should take a look at the charter provisions and see if there's anything that they want tweaked there.
Sure.
Term limits, for example, do they want to put 3 instead of 2? I mean, so, there's still something for them to do in this process to get to us so that we can get it to the council.
Is there any
Pie in the
consensus
sky.
on,
Any pie in the sky?
is there any consensus on what changes this body would recommend? Would it still be to take them out of the charter?
If you remember, the genesis of this was a concern that there were people out there suing to make these districts. That's the way the whole thing got started. And then when we came to the city council with this question about districts, there was negative response, and the response was back, what about taking us out of the charter?
Mhm.
And that was sent back to us. And that's where it stands right now. With to me, the idea of this was to try to fend off this lawsuit issue, this
I agree,
district
and I
issue.
agree, that's a factor.
And we've been given this other thing about, I mean, for us to say they should get compensated, I'm sure they would want to have that. I guess they would want to have that. Maybe the school board doesn't.
But that's not
want to pay for it.
under consideration here.
It is. It
Well,
could be.
because it would allow the
It's in the charter.
opportunity. Okay.
That's why I think they should look at these provisions and figure out if there's
Figure out what
something
they
they want
want,
to change.
And it's really not in this case for us to tell this other board what we should be changing if they don't want to change it.
Okay.
So we're going to shift all the blame of recommendations
To them.
to the school board when we
Kick
send
that
it up
can
to the
right
city
back.
council. This is good, I like this.
It's not a matter of blame.
This is
It's not a matter of
better known
blame.
as kicking the can down the road.
The problem's not.
No,
there's no
I would
problem.
use that. If it got kicked back to us by the council, then the school board kicked it back as well. So
So we can
have a
keep
strong-
kicking.
It's not a problem right now.
This is the Long Beach model. We don't have enough information to actually fully consider it.
I'm with you. Yes, I agree.
Okay.
okay, so let's be clear, just to summarize, what further information are we seeking?
I still think we need to find out what happens if they're taken out of the charter and the corporate status of whether they can function within the state. I think we need to,
Let me pause there for a second if I can. Is that a question that,
that's a legal question.
but would the city attorney like to address that, or should I address that through school board or school district legal counsel?
Yeah, I would think it would be better from
That's what I'm
them.
offering.
And then, I would appreciate it, and then I can review their work to see, because I'd be looking at other examples, and there aren't many other examples of moving from a charter to not a charter. So that would be great. If they can share it with me, I'll give my independent thoughts on
And I
their
can
work product.
simply send, tomorrow I can send, or tonight even, I can send the email to the superintendent that we'd like to get
Yep.
legal counsel's input on what happens, and I would take it to the extreme of if the school district were taken out of the city charter completely.
Right.
And that's the,
Right.
extreme case.
And then that also would play into the whole debate that I missed part of as to when you could have the election. Because what happens if it ceases to exist? You know, or how long does the election still go through if you don't
Yeah,
know?
a November, well, the only option we could say it takes effect post-dated.
Right, exactly.
So that whoever decides to run next fall for the March election cycle in 2025 could still do so.
Yeah, it would say
Wouldn't
you're
impact
in the charter until this date in the future. So, but it would be nice to know what exactly
And
happens.
can we do that? Could we make a charter amendment that would go into effect as of a certain
Yeah,
date?
you could. That I'm confident you
When
could
they
do.
went from 2-year terms to 4-year terms in
But
the
we're
regular
taking,
charter.
but we're taking it, so does it stay in the charter and just says deleted or?
It stays in the charter until, effective this date. So just picking a date, if it was on the, November 24 ballot, you could say until July 1st, 2025 or, 2027, whatever the math works out. It's, as of that date, it ceases to be in the charter, which you may need to do if, to your point, the school board needs to take action that effective this date, we become this corporate body.
That, and as well as, at some point, there needs to be an alignment of term between the current March odd year and the November even year.
That's an internal issue.
That is correct. That's for the school district to figure out, but we would consider that as to when it goes onto the ballot and when it becomes effective.
And that's why it'd be important to get school district council involvement now.
That it works with ed code routinely and
Exactly.
and that is why I offered that. So
Yeah, I appreciate it because normally I'm trying to see if we can overcome the ed code to enforce one of our laws.
Hire another law firm.
Does the school board have debt?
have what?
Did they have debt? They have
Debt? No.
They have a bond, don't they, out there?
Yeah, they
Well,
are.
the city has debt.
That's the question. If they borrow money, they borrow through the city, the cities?
No, they've got a couple bonds out.
Yeah.
They had a $147 million bond and they had a
that's not debt
$65
to the
million
school
bond
district.
before
Yes,
that.
it is.
Yeah, it is. I'll get it on my property tax bill. Look on your property tax bill.
Who's it debt to if it's not to the school
Who
board?
borrowed the money?
The school district.
But did it through a bond. The taxpayers are who's liable for it.
No, this is, the school district holds the debt.
Yeah.
So they borrow in the name of a
They got
corporation?
two bonds out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, yeah.
As
Right.
the school district issued the
So
bonds.
if they are off the city charter, then that's the corporate entity that they would become, right?
But, the question is what action has to be, if you're set
Is
up.
there action?
Is there action that has to be done? We exist, they'll exist under our charter. Does some action have to be taken to exist separately pursuant to all the rules under the Ed Code? And that's the question I don't know.
And that actually, you may want to, when you talk to your school board lawyer, find out if there's any changes that need to be made to the bond documents, because it may be a term of default under the bond agreement if something ceases to exist. So they should be checking out whatever
I'm guessing they're the
obligation.
bond attorneys.
What?
I'm guessing the bond attorneys.
Well, there may be a provision.
They know
in the
exactly
bond,
who they're going to sue.
But it may be a term of default.
Right, it could be
a defined term.
yeah, exactly.
Well, if the school district is going to weigh in on this issue, if I'm a school board member, I'm going to want to know what the
They're gonna
cost
be
is going to be. So this gets back to some kind of estimate, and I know it depends on,
But the school district is seeking that information.
yeah, or are they already seeking that
Already, yes.
information?
We just haven't gotten it
Oh,
yet.
that's right, because you
Yes.
said you talked to the county. Okay. Oh,
And then the other piece that I would like to know is if they're neutral on whether it's in the charter or not, are there pieces of the charter that they think need to be amended related to the school board so that they can at least get some things that they want us to consider and recommend to the council, such
That
as
could be
term
on-
limits?
And that could be on at any time.
Yeah.
Okay, so all fair for considerations. Those are the key things. I will get the school district council to respond to the inquiries as to what needs to happen as far as the entity. How does the entity continue to exist? Does any action need to be taken? And also inclusive with that would be, does this affect anything with the existing bonds? And then
And then
the more general for the board itself is, do they want charter amendments in any way? Or do they prefer that it just be taken out of the charter? You're still looking for that.
Right. And the last piece, which I really don't care because it doesn't impact the city, but it's something that since the school board members want to look into, does it change their personal liability and protections that they have if they're completely as a separate corporate entity? I don't know. I don't think it's going to matter ultimately, but it is something, if it does fall out, that they may have some personal liability.
I don't see why.
Yeah, I think as long as we answer the first question satisfactorily, they shouldn't have to worry about the
Right.
third question. If we mess up the first question or don't address it, they could potentially. But that's a better question for the school board attorney.
Move to continue.
So keep that in the back of your mind
Second.
when they talk to the.
I would want to take back to them, I'm going to pause for a second for that. Is there any at all direction this body would go to? You know, Bob, you
to me,
had started with,
To me,
Take 'em out.
Just take them out and let them control whatever they want to control. But to pick at it and say, well, maybe it should be 3 terms and maybe it should be a different election cycle or something, that's their issues. This is not, I don't think we need to cherry pick
Let's
these.
go back to, it's the people's issue.
Well, it's the people's issue ultimately.
But you may want to have in section 16, for example, if they want to keep it in, do you need to modify jurisdiction over public schools to reflect what the school district is already doing on both ends?
Right.
Where it's not just
Not just
K through 12.
yeah.
And so that may be
Because
something.
we have, you know, and I just looked at that too, well, kinder is no longer we now have TK, and it's being prescribed by law that we shall have TK.
So,
And we have the South Bay Adult School, which is a separate entity overseen as part of the district, but it's not a integral part of the district itself. It is a separate budget, a separate.
I don't know these things. That's
Okay.
your specialty, but I'm just saying, have them
It's
look at
becoming
it.
that way. Any other points with regard to this? So I'm of the same general direction as Mr. Pinsler, that I think the ultimate solution for everybody's good, except for cost consideration, is remove.
That's a major cost, a major issue. Or could,
I'm not sure it's that major.
I mean, who's going to fund extra
Well,
costs?
it's a major issue because right now it's 0, but that's a.
Right. I mean, the school district has a budget bigger than the city, so.
You also take money from something else.
It's more rental.
But that is the concern, yeah,
Shifting money,
because,
shifting money.
and that's the point that's been made. This is taking money away from students. And that is a concern. It is. But the realization at the same time is that all the other school districts do it and handle it, so it's not impossible at all. It's
Nothing's
just,
impossible.
it's a fact of life for most. That we're the unique situation, once again, the outliers, you said. So
but it's also, it's taking control away from our voters. And that is a big philosophical, do we want to be like the majority?
I disagree. The voters are, since they're contiguous districts, they're both elected bodies with the same electorate.
No, if you take them out of the charter.
you're saying it becomes an ed
Becomes an
code
ed code.
issue,
Becomes
which
an ed
is
code
not
issue.
locally controlled.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It takes control away from our local voters. And that may be the defining issue in whether the voters want to approve it. Like, you'd have to have compelling reasons, I think, and perhaps you can find them, but don't underestimate how much Redondo residents like local control. So,
Do we have any example where the charter trumps ed code?
yeah, term limits. The school district sued the city, and they said that the ed code doesn't have term limits or doesn't have required term limits, and the city prevailed because the charter trumped the ed code when it came to the term, how you choose the Board of Education. So that's an example of
But
where.
isn't that really more a situation that the ed code didn't really address it, that the ed code
doesn't prevent it
doesn't
or
prevent it?
preclude it.
But became down, the school's argument, as I understand it, predates my time as city attorney, was that it's according to the Ed Code, that Ed Code prevails over a charter, and the court ruled that, no, this is a charter issue, it's a matter of local control, and they can choose how and under what terms. The same thing applies to the no pay, because you're allowed pay under the Ed Code. Here, it restricts it to only the necessary expenses as provided under the Ed Code. So there are very specific examples of.
The other big one is the election cycle,
Yeah,
because Ed Code does not allow school districts to pick their own and to have a March election as we do now under the charter. It is simply not a possibility. And it gets, as I recently found out, it gets really complicated because the Ed Code is written purely around the November election. That's the only thing they talk about, and when you need to do certain things within the month of December, and there's nothing about anything March because it just wasn't anticipated.
so, and that's why, again, it could be bad, it could be good, but the issue will be it takes control away from the local voters and gives to the voters of gives it to the legislature of the state of California.
I think, I may be misinterpreting, but I think what Matt was saying is that most of what the school board does is
That's
under
on
the
my mind, Ken.
Oh, absolutely.
And these things are specified, these are specific things that are structural things, not operational things.
Correct.
And that's really, the question is whether the school board wants to be that way or this way. And whichever way they want to do it, it seems to me is what we should follow.
Yeah, and the preference of, is it better to have school board elected separately from city offices? And in that November, it's an odd cycle for a school board to take office because it's a rough time of year for new school board members. November is an easier time of year to
It's a rough
onboard.
time of year for council members because they immediately get thrown into budgets.
And we do too.
I know, yeah,
So, and in the bigger picture too, I think about, is it better to have our local school board on the same unique election cycle as our own city council and mayor and other elected offices, or separating that to November like everybody else? Yeah, it's certainly either one can work, that's proven. Mm-hmm. Is there a preference for that? Because
Part of our complaint in SB 415, our briefs talked about the voter fatigue, that when people are turning out to vote for president, they're, not necessarily.
they're preoccupied with that.
for the ballot.
Yeah, they may drop people don't vote, or they just pick names or jobs. Like they're not as informed on the local issue as the people that turn out in a March election. There are arguments for or con.
These are opinion
Yeah,
things.
but what we pointed out and said, but it's up to our local voters to be able to choose that under the charter in SB 415. The question here is, are there good enough reasons to take it out of the charter, to give up that control, take it away from the local voters to be able to control, how they get elected?
But that argument was also about whether a charter city has control of your municipal affairs. And I think that was the ultimate result I got out of that lawsuit, was that, yes, there are things that you, the state, can't tell us to do.
At the trial court level, at the appellate court level, we had 3 arguments, and the first was this doesn't apply to charter cities because it didn't say charter cities. And we lost at the trial level, and the appellate court decided not to force the issue. And they just said, yeah, we agree, it doesn't apply to charter cities because it wasn't written to. So it lives for another day if they want to write a new SB 415.
But that has ramifications beyond just the elections,
Yeah.
being a charter city.
But it's one of the things that's specifically in the state constitution is we get to choose how our representatives are elected and the terms for which they're elected. And SB 415 said that, you know, if they can do this, they can do anything. The doctrine of municipal, local affairs is gone. And so we have that currently with the school board as well. The question is, are there compelling enough reasons, because it's a different entity, to take it out of the charter or not? And that's what you and the school board have to decide to recommend to the council.
So the one potential compelling reason had to do with lawsuits and the city entanglement with that.
Are you talking about with the school board?
Yeah.
No, the issue,
That was the original one.
The original thing was, there's this group of people going around trying to get, particularly school boards, to go to districts. And I raised it because obviously that's a charter issue. And then when we brought it in front of the city council, they said, well, the school board isn't interested in that, but they are interested in getting out of the charter. So that's where it came back to us.
But
It's as simple as that.
But that was the original thing. For
Original
us
thing was
the reason
how do we deal with this movement to go to districts?
Right. And our
Since we
solution,
are districted in our
our
city
first
council.
solution was to go ahead and move to by district or by trustee area
Right.
to avoid that issue of entangling the city in that.
Right. That was the original.
Yes.
Original
And
point of it.
that remains.
It may very well remain. Depends on Malibu, whether they split up or not. Who knows what's going to happen with that?
I think we're years away from that one yet. So.
Well, because the After County has to finish, and now the lawsuit can begin.
Yeah.
In earnest.
But the districtors are out there. They're doing it with cities. They're doing it with.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's why Torrance went to
But
districts.
Torrance is different though, right? In terms of demographics, it's different.
Yes.
I understand that. I understand the demographic thing, but I doubt that's going to stop them. This is.
But it's hard for them to
It's hard.
win. Like they shouldn't win if they don't have that. And Torrance,
It was
they
the
clearly
pressure
had
it was the
that.
pressure that got them to go to
At that
districts.
point, it
because they were
becomes,
gonna
is it
lose.
worth the fight?
Yeah, it wasn't worth it to them because they were going to lose. I would certainly recommend to the council, it's worth the fight because they can't identify what they need to identify to prevail. So.
Anyway,
That brings me back to
This-
my
this
question. Do
horse
we
is
want to
dead.
continue?
But I
this
won't be
until
here
July, or
whenever
is it-
that comes about, so who knows what the future.
not your problem.
Yes.
I'm just trying to
1
gather
year, 10 months, and
something
one
to take back to the school board that
But who's counting?
Yes,
the
exactly.
result of our discussion needs to be a little bit more than whatever the school board wants to do, because we're just,
I think we're trying to learn more also about like what the impact would be.
Right.
Right. That's kind of we're looking more into it now. We're also learning as they're learning.
We don't have enough information at this point, I think, to make an informed decision on a recommendation. The school board can give us part of it. We can get part of it from the school board's lawyers. But I think at some point, we just need to bring ourselves to the point where we can actually make the informed recommendation. So we're not dependent on the school board completely.
we're not, but I'm trying to explore it. At this point, are there compelling reasons that we would list even now? And the one would be the original one that we started with, was the entanglement in the potential lawsuit, because that would exist right now. Whether or not we succeed, that's a whole different deal. But that was the original thing, was to get us out from under that completely. And then beyond that is, what are other considerations for the complete removal? Are there other factors that come into play, such as, what is the loss of local control that would be faced by removing it from the charter? Well, generically, everything falls to Ed Code, and Ed Code is subject to state of California legislation, so it's not locally controlled. Any other ones that I can at least take back to them and, summarize our discussion?
And I would point out, at least my research indicates that Redondo actually hasn't put up an assemblyman or a state senator in many, many years that as familiar with what's going on in our city as, like, say, Torrance, that seems to have regular people do it. So if we have that local interest, we need to do something to make sure that we have the input into the state legislature if we're going to leave it to them.
In this essence, that we don't have a legislative member directly from Redondo Beach.
Is as familiar. Fortunately, our assemblyman is a former school board member in Torrance, so he's familiar with the Torrance issues. But if there are anything unique about Redondo, we may not get that input at the state level.
I disagree with that. I mean, first of all, they're not that much different. And secondly, there is no district, there's no assembly district other than that they're exclusively in one city like Los Angeles that doesn't have to deal with multiple cities, and they do that all the time. So I think that's disparaging to former assembly members that they would not understand, even take the attempt to understand. They have staffs that deal with each city. That's wrong, absolutely wrong.
Well, it's not wrong if you don't look at it from the point of view that all politics is local. Well, and if you're looking at Sacramento telling you what to do, and I could go through a laundry list of bills that, generally speaking, are detrimental to your quality of life because of what Sacramento does in the general interest of the good as they view it. He's right.
I would agree with that, but if you have an assembly district that covers 5 cities, by definition, 4 of them don't have any representation.
I don't disagree. All I'm saying is let's concentrate on the local control.
Yeah.
And skip whether or not the guy is representing us,
Right.
because they're not. I mean, that's plain and simple. I mean,
Getting back to your question, though, with regards to what do you take to the school board, I think one of the things that was brought up is ask them if they make the assumption that they remain as part of the charter, are there specific things they want changed, like the ability to get paid? Do they want us to address term limits separately for them as opposed to the other elected offices? Because obviously that can be done with the charter amendments and changing the languages. So there are some very specific things you could bring up to them and ask, assuming you stay in our charter for whatever reasons, local control, whatever, do you still want to address some specific issues that, to give them more flexibility down the road?
Okay. I'm hearing no other, Bob and I are of the mindset, I believe, at this point the removal would be the best option.
I'm not of that mindset.
And that's fine. That's what I'm trying to get a feel.
Thank you for letting me have my own opinion. Generally speaking, I do have my own opinion, so I'm not worried about what you say.
I would never doubt that, Mr. DeWittiak.
I didn't think you would.
Anyone else have anything one direction or the other, or is it just?
I don't have enough information to make this, to pull it out. I don't know why we pull it out.
What are the compelling reasons?
I don't have
Yeah.
the
And that's what I was trying to gather earlier. At this point, the one compelling reason was the disentanglement of the city.
I don't see a benefit right now, but I need to learn more.
So again, back to my question, do you want to bring it back up in June, or do you want to wait until July or some other date to give?
No, we can bring it back in June.
Okay. So then I would move to continue this discussion to June.
Okay.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Comment?
Aye.
Any comment?
Oh, public comment. Thank you.
We have none.
Appreciate that.
Well,
You get so caught up in the discussions. Very good. All in favor? Was an aye?
Aye.
None opposed? Passes unanimously with the exception of,
Here he
Spencer
is
not
again.
present. Okay, there's an aye as well. Thank you. I will take it back to the school board and ask for further input. Moving on to J2, discussion and possible action regarding possibly adding periodic departmental management audits to the charter. Mr. Morocco.
So this is a triangle. I don't know if it can be seen on television, but our city charter is basically made up of three parts. One is we have the council, which does the policy. The other is we have the city manager that does all the day-to-day running of the city. And the third one is the citizenship. We've talked about that already, that our citizen participation is important, and we have the voters decide on a lot of stuff. And when I was looking through the charter, section 9.5 deals with citizen participation. And it's very clear that the citizens have a role in how the city is carried out. So one of the things that I thought would be helpful is if we had some sort of mechanism where we could get some sort of management audit to figure out if our city departments are working efficiently, transparently, responding to the public, as far as that goes. And that led to me researching the League of California Cities for management audits. And so what I'm going to be proposing with this is that we have periodic department management audits added to the charter, a little section that deals with it. The first question that came up when we were briefly discussing putting it on the agenda was something about an internal auditor or controller in it. I did talk to Mr. Solomon, and it would seem that given that the treasurer deals with regular audits, that maybe that's something that the treasurer could be the one who oversees the overall process of doing these audits. And again, it's just focusing on is our management working effectively with regards to all our departments. And so that would be one of the considerations. The other would be, we probably would want to have the citizens driving in the process. And one of the thoughts that I had given, and I look forward to Eleanor's comment on this, is that the clerk's office would help get a group of citizens together. And I think the ones that are most involved are the ones that are already on the commissions, and they could submit their names for random selection by the city clerk to put like 3 or 5 people on it, so that there would be an oversight board as well. And then have something where it would be published, there would be metrics set up by both this, by the treasurer and or the city manager, with the participation of the city council, just so that we can figure out how to audit it. And apparently it's not that unusual. I think I included in the materials something from the city of Tulsa, which does these kind of audits in your materials. You can see that the scope of the first one is really what starts the whole process. The League of California Cities has a whole section on management audits, and San Diego has an audit, a whole department dealing with it. I don't think we need to do it on an annual basis, and I would propose if we put language in there that it be periodic, say no more than 3 years, or if the council decides that it should be more often, that they should be able to do it. But it would not be a funded person, it would be a funded entity. There's a whole organization that deals with these kind of things that the League of California Cities has recommended. So I think it would be something that we could find somebody independent to do these periodic audits, and then publishing the report to the community so they could see if our departments are actually doing what we anticipate to do it. Because the way I perceive it now, the city manager controls all of, I think you said 430 employees or something like that. But there's really no transparency back to the public. Is the department doing and meeting the needs of the community? It does, the city manager does ultimately report back to the council, but it may not be, if there's a specific issue that needs to be addressed that the public is aware of, but the council may not be. And right now, the only recourse seems to be to fire the city manager if there's a problem with it, which is, we have a good, for example, now we have a really good city manager, so I don't know if that's the extreme, but if there's something that citizens can speak up and get fixed, I think it could be addressed. So that was the concept behind it.
Kind of like Yelp for municipal employees. I'm asking.
What?
Kind of like Yelp for municipal employees,
I don't necessarily know it's employees, it's looking at the department.
departments.
So it's like, the one I'm most familiar with is community services, because those were where my commission was. Are they responding, like one of the metrics may be, are they responding to public inquiries on a timely basis? And you could analyze all the records that are kept in the city now for multiple years and say, okay, so this person made this inquiry and it's taken them a month to even acknowledge that it's been received. So that could be one of the metrics. It could be, are they understaffed and the staff people overworked because there's some sort of not sufficient allocation of resources within the department? Are they meeting what the community, like parks, for example, it's like, are they doing what the community would like to see or should be seeing, running it efficiently? So that's kind of the transparency part of it.
How do you separate the wheat from the chaff?
What do you mean?
Well, you got people who are, I'll just say, born complainers.
Right.
Nothing goes their way, and they'll tell you about that. And you know, it's our city's obligation to listen, but I'm not sure it's the city's obligation to, let's say, act upon every complaint. So how are we going to set up so it's fair for both sides, I guess?
The metrics?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the city council obviously can't do anything because they're limited only to deal with the city manager. They can't interfere with any of the departments. No, that's what it says in the charter,
They
9.1.
talk to the city manager, say, hey, you're our employee, guess what?
But are you getting all that information filtered up about the efficiency? So it's a double-edged sword. I think that if you have an independent person like the treasurer in charge of the whole process, who's elected and accountable to the community, then at least you're going to have somebody that can run and determine who's hired. And then again, if you have the involved.
I have the concept. I mean, in a sterile world, I understand what you're saying, but I'm not sure how that works in the real world. Bob, I'm sorry, I don't mean to do the chairman's job.
Thank you for acknowledging that you have a chairman. Mr. Bensler.
First of all, cities of larger cities usually have a city controller or a city auditor. The names change. And that is not a typical position within large cities. Small cities almost never have those positions because the responsibility is felt that it falls to the city manager, who is in a city that's small enough where a city council can have a little bit more of their hands around issues such as this. The process that goes on is of review of what goes on within a city. For, let's say, the city controller of Los Angeles. That is a large investigative job. It's different than being the treasurer. It's different than being the city attorney. It is specifically to review processes within the city. In a large city, that makes way more sense than it does in a city of our size. In the case of Tulsa, strangely enough, the city auditor is the only elected department head. They don't elect city attorney, they elect the city clerk, they don't elect the city treasurer, but they elect the city auditor. And who knows, maybe sometime back in the history of Tulsa, that was felt to be an important thing to do. This 9.5 doesn't have anything to do with this. This is whether you believe that the review processes within this city are insufficient for the city manager and the city council to have control over this, have management control over this. And my experience is that different city managers have different ways of managing. And when there are problems, they tend to rise to the city council level. In a city of this size, placing in the charter another one of these required steps that is somewhat amorphous doesn't really add anything. It really doesn't. I mean, audits are done. If you need like they did with the survey or the Moss Adams report, there seemed to be a problem. They went outside and they got the council to do this council to do this review because it was felt, it rose to the city council level that this needed to be done. In a city of this size, having that stricture placed into this charter, it really doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay. Let me ask you, to what extent are you thinking about for this? Is it a Moss Adams level report on a biannual basis or something, or do you have a thought on that?
And I'm going to go to both the League of California Cities and what they do in San Diego. It is basically, can the city take additional steps to improve the process for filling available positions, help increase transparency, and promote public participation and monitor efficiency and effectiveness? I don't think this is not a financial kind of audit. It's more of a process and system.
Moss Adams was more than financial.
Oh, yeah.
I understand.
Operational.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm asking, is that, as that's the only thing we have in hand to compare to, are you thinking to that level? And how often, or not to that level? Or what is it that you're...
If I was proposing it actual language, I would say no more than 3 years, every 3 years, unless the city council decides that it needs something more frequently.
And to what level or extent, or...
Something that could be
Level of
published to the public.
But that could be a one-page document.
It could be a one-page document. They could say, I looked at this department and said, hey, everything seems to be functioning well. It could be a multiple-page document. It could be that they set up metrics that, again, communication to the public and responsiveness to the public is a metric that comes to mind readily.
This enables that, is what...
No, it requires it.
Required it.
Well, the
the
citizen
charters are required.
participation, though, it doesn't...
Citizen participation that's in there is, it's somewhat boilerplate.
But the other thing is-
if someone has a problem, they can go up to city council.
Have you found any examples of city charters that do prescribe something like this, and where and how do they do it?
Most of the cities that I've seen that have something like this, actually, as Mr. Pinsler said, actually have controllers in place. I don't think that we need to fund a separate position, because I don't think that this is going to have to suck up all the time of an individual. I think you can contract it out. There's a whole group of management auditors out there that the League of California Cities mentions that you can basically tap into. You're going to still need a point person on it. And I read section 9.1 as that the council really can't direct the departments. And so it's going to have to be from this citizen side. Again, it's a partnership. Our charter, the citizens are equal partners, as is the city manager, as is the council. And we've discussed, we're giving up some control to, it's we the citizens that give up the control to the council. And so therefore, this is just saying, let us get a report on a regular or irregular basis that tells us how we're doing and if there's any improvements that can be made.
Mr. Kilroy?
Yeah, just put my 2 cents in. When you brought this up, kind of made me kind of nervous because it does seem to try to do an end around on section 9.1. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought the citizens actually have a voice to address efficiency in departments. We have a public safety commission that obviously deals with both fire and police. I know in the Harbor Commission, we get regular reports quarterly reports with regards to what's going on down at the harbor from both the police, citations, calls for service, all those sorts of things as to the efficacy of those departments. We have a Parks and Rec that certainly deals with community services and whatnot. So there's a lot of board commissions that we have that specifically address each citizen interaction with each of the departments, with many of the departments. I won't say every department, budget and finance, most of the departments of the city. And so I think our boards and commissions really kind of address that.
So you're saying a lot of it does happen as it is now,
Yeah,
but what
it
we don't
happens.
have
That's how it rises
there
to
is
the
no
council.
explicit structure to it.
Yeah,
It's a,
No, you're right.
it does
And,
happen, but
people ask me whether it's a stop sign or something, a pothole or whatever, and I say, well, if you're having an issue, one of the first things you can do, obviously communicate and put your request in, but you can also go in front of the Public Works Commission or the Parks and Rec Commission, whatever the commission, whatever would be handling that, and put your 2 cents in about what you think should be handled better or differently, or what something that needs attention, to create a whole nother level of bureaucracy to do something that I think the public already has a number of different avenues to address their concerns. And like I said, to me, it also seems, how do you even do that without doing a employee evaluation? How do you sit there and talk about the effectiveness of response to citizens' requests and whatnot from Public Works if you're not addressing the competency and the work ethic and whatnot of the department and the director?
yeah, you have to separate the process and the structure from the people.
Yeah, I just believe that we already have that with a lot of our boards and commissions that address those things.
Good. Mr. Pinsner?
I absolutely agree with that. And I give you another example. And Joe, I think you were there at the same time when the Orange County bankruptcy happened. One of the things we did was we told the city treasurer, we need a report. And that report has stayed on it's quarterly, I believe now. But so something happened that triggered this requirement. And a commission will bubble up to the city council if there is a problem. And this city is compact enough to get that. Now, when you deal with Los Angeles, or you deal with San Diego, or you deal with Tulsa, you deal with any of these much larger cities than this, you may very well need to have that level of responsibility in a controller or an auditor. But I don't believe that here. We have a good example. The treasurer report came out of a concern about the county treasurer in Orange County going bankrupt.
It seems like what you're asking, Mr. Morales, is something that's more preemptive and proactive rather than reactive. Is that
Correct.
fair?
Yeah.
Just different sides of the Understood.
A little more history. When that occurred, we actually formed a subcommittee of the council, and we called it the treasurer's oversight.
And it was a reactive thing to it.
Yes, it was reactive to
That's what that's just a slight.
Mostly because we asked the treasurer for some reports, and we got.
Let's not get caught in the same way.
Yeah.
Right. So the transparency, we actually had another afternoon meeting, subcommittee, the mayor and myself, and the treasurer would show up and give us a report.
I wonder who enabled the Moss Adams? Was that a council direction?
That was the city treasurer,
City treasurer did.
right? So he reduced his position from full-time to part-time, and then that funding would go for the Moss Adams.
And is the Moss Adams an ongoing?
Ongoing, yeah, that's budgeted for
I thought
ongoing.
that contract ended.
It ended, but we're looking at doing some RFPs to
Continue it.
Yes,
And
continue
would
it.
that essentially meet what you're thinking?
I'm thinking there's nothing that's actually shared with the community of voters that says this is how our departments are doing. That's where I'm at. It's like, yes, I understand your points on the commission. I was on one as well, which is probably part of the reason I'm actually advocating that there needs to be more transparency on it. But I think that as an equal partner in running this city, the citizens should have something that's presented to them. And I think that 9.1 limits the city council's ability to actually go in and look at these departments and come out with that report. So I'm coming up with an alternative that I think will at least have that information out there for the public. I think the mayor could probably do it too. I don't think he's limited by 9.1, but I think there does need to be something that at least lets the community know what's going on.
Would the Moss Adams report meet what you're looking for?
I think the Moss Adams report goes beyond a little more.
I agree, but it would definitely meet it.
I think what you could probably do for the first go round is come up with metrics that you would think that the community would want to see. You know, you mentioned public works, so it's like potholes. It's like, how long does it take to fix a pothole in this community? You know, that's just a weird example. But it's something that you could say as a metrics. I know Councilman Obaji was like, stop signs, you know, we got another one in District 4. I mean, that's a metric, a standard metric. So I think the hardest part of this is going to be coming up with some metrics that the community would take an interest in and say, okay, our city is doing great on this. The efficiency and effectiveness, I think Moss Adams deals with some of that stuff, but nobody's, you know, in the communities actually knowing how are departments operating effectively, efficiency, are they using their resources? And I think that as a citizen, we're entitled to that information.
So this RFP that you're talking about, was that initiated by the council to move ahead with that, or was that a continued item from the city treasurer?
I think it's more this, it's continued item from the city treasurer of their funding was to be allocated to that.
Okay, as a good use of that money on an ongoing basis. And it sounds like that could meet what you're talking about.
Do we know if the new city treasurer is going to continue this?
Oh, I'm sure he is.
Oh, yeah, I would think so, yeah.
Yes.
We don't know it, but
Yeah, no, he's mentioned.
it's one of his favorite things in the whole world.
Well, he does the contract, so I mentioned it to him that, you know, are we still going to go on with budgeting Moss or someone like Moss Adams or Moss Adams? And
But not at that level necessarily.
what do you mean? It would be the same level.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, from my point of view, Moss hasn't finished doing the stuff that was requested just because of new financial directors and then, which was part of it. So they did as you know, the responsibilities of the treasurer, you know, payroll, this finance director and the city treasurer, and that was being worked on. The other part that I want to see, which is sort of the doing the testing of those items that were objectives that relate to actually going to the department and reviewing to see if they're actually doing the process per our policies.
Yeah, big picture, what I'm thinking, where I'm headed with all this is, I don't know if this is the thing that's appropriate to be prescribed in the city charter, and how do you effectively prescribe it in a city charter to really get what you want? Because it's that delicate balance of
Frankly, to me,
simply listing or going into the level of detail that would not be.
The problem is, again, 9.1 says that the city
an
council
art-
can't
yeah.
interfere with the departments.
right.
Is
So
an
it
audit
has to
and
come from a
interference.
different source. And
Is an audit and interference.
I think if you're starting to question the processes within a department, I think that can be interpreted as you're trying to dictate how they run it. That's why I'm saying the third prong, which is the citizens can actually end up doing this more effectively than the council will.
Well, frankly, what you're saying is that our commission system doesn't work.
No, I'm not saying that. I don't know if it's working or not.
The reason for the commissions is to create citizen involvement with very specific parts of the city. That's why these commissions exist. Not only to to learn about those parts of but to have some influence on them. The staff has to come and report to them if they wish for them to report to them. If there is a concern, the city commission will pass it up to the city council. To remove and make it so that an entity, even an amorphous citizenry, can go into a city department and create whatever havoc they wish to create, is dysfunctional. Right now, the city manager in a city of our size can be monitored well enough by a city council and city commissions to determine whether or not that person is doing the job. To remove that or to create some other kind of relationship with those departments makes the department heads wonder who's their boss. How do they operate? Can they do something with the go-ahead of a city manager when there's this other group out there that's going to start willy-nilly telling them not to? It's a management dysfunction beyond belief.
Okay. First of all, I'm not sure that they're making any recommendations to dysfunction. Second of all, I do believe that the people who ultimately are the bosses of everybody that's in the city, including all the elected officials and the council, are the voters that elect them and have them appointed. We've delegated certain responsibilities to our council, and the council has delegated certain responsibilities, and we as citizens, through the charter, to the city manager to run the day-to-day operations. But I think ultimately, the citizens of this community are the bosses. And again, all I'm asking for is some sort of process where we can see if the systems are working and present that back to the public so they can get confidence that it's actually working the way it's supposed to.
Even when you live in a state like New Hampshire, where you have town meetings, there is still delegated responsibility to the management of the cities and towns. You have in those town meetings opportunities, as we have every 2 weeks, or sometimes more than 2 weeks, the opportunity for people to come and to express an opinion. That is what 9.5 is all about. And it is the management structure will fall apart if that method of running a city is changed, I believe. That's why the council management form of government was created.
Yes.
And the citizens have enormous influence over what goes on in the city, because every day they can come up and talk to that podium and say whatever they want to say. They can contact their city council members. They can join commissions. They can go and report to the commissions. They can use the Comcade to get action happening. This is a management issue that isn't what you're stating is a non-issue.
Chair, I have City Treasurer Solomon on Zoom.
Good, great.
Okay,
Bring him in.
I knew we could ferret him out.
go ahead.
He thought he was getting away from us.
Thank you,
Motion to
Madam Clerk,
extend.
members of the committee. Eugene Solomon, City Treasurer. Just wanted to respond to a few of the questions that came up. The Moss Adams report was a report that reviewed a number of different things, including city processes, roles, responsibilities across departments. It was funded by, in part, the City Treasurer's Office, initiated by the City Treasurer's Office, by my predecessor, Mr. Deals, in part funded by the City Clerk's Office and the Finance Director's Office. as the clerk has mentioned, we have discussions, and if it is approved as part of the budget, going forward for similar work to be done within the city, such as what Moss Adams accomplished. It's an ongoing issue. There are processes within the existing charter, for example, with the treasurer's office in section 11.1, where if departments are not submitting, for example, the regular the monies, the treasurer goes to the city manager for resolution of that issue. It flows through the city manager. I could see how it would end up being somewhat problematic with HR, were say the city treasurer or another department head independently to begin reviewing employee work, as it were, from that as a metric standpoint. But with regard to efficiencies and with regard to procedures and processes, if that's what I understand Mr. Morocco's chief interest, perhaps some resolution like having regular external auditors like Moss Adams, if not Moss Adams, reviewing our roles, procedures, having a report submitted every 3 years, or having this examined every 3 years. But whether or not that's a component of a charter amendment or expands existing powers within the charter, not sure that that would feather in well with HR and the city manager's authorities.
So could this be something that would be done by council ordinance?
I don't think they can under 9.1.
Well, under 9.1, if you read that,
They already
then,
do it.
that's what I'm saying. They
It's already
have,
done.
by creating the commissions by ordinance, and if the commissions are doing this, that would constitute.
If what you're saying is true, then Moss Adams is illegal.
The treasurer is doing it, that's not the council.
Nobody. The city treasurer doesn't have the right to tell the city manager to do anything either.
Actually, it doesn't say that.
Yeah, and 9.1 is exclusive to council.
I understand that.
Council and the mayor.
Yeah.
Look, I-
If I may, in section 11.1, E, for example, where prepare and submit to the city manager monthly reports as to the failure of any department heads, officers, and or employees within the city failing to promptly turn over monies to the treasurer as required by this charter or by ordinance. That is a report that is submitted to the city manager for action rather than, say, delivering it directly to council. There are authorities within there, but those authorities direct the report to the city manager's office.
Actually directs it to the city clerk and then to the city manager. And that could change depending on what you do with the city clerk's position.
My point, and I understand Mr. Pensler's point of view, is somehow I think there's no downside to the citizens of this community to get a independent picture of whether the processes are working, whether there is transparency, whether the participation levels, and whether everything's operating efficiently.
I think we're talking about semantics here. Your transparency is different than the mechanics of how do you judge what you're doing. So when we use words like modality or metrics and things like that, it means different things to different people in the calculation. So generally speaking, I think people who are dissatisfied or extremely pleased are the ones you're going to hear from. But that has absolutely nothing to do with transparency. Transparency is, if I want to know, can I know? All right? So I think your point is well taken about transparency, and no one's ever going to get me off of the dime or the spot that says the people are the most important part of this equation. So forget that. I mean, but to the rest of this discussion, people have ample we make a motion, guess what? We have to have public comment. So everybody has ample opportunity to get in the game. You just want to be able to see, well, I'm not going to put words in your mouth. What I hear you saying is you want to see the bigger picture on how everybody is satisfied. No?
That's a fair assessment on it.
Well, I'm speaking to other people out there. I'm not talking metrics or any other kind of word. I'm talking, how are we going to judge this? How do we judge the employee? And that is not.
We're not asking to judge, make
Well,
judgments
you
on
are.
a point.
You are, because like, again, if you get your pothole filled, you're happy. You don't get your pothole, or you don't get a speed bump, you're not happy. All right? So if you don't get a stop sign, you're not happy. If you get a ticket, you're really not happy. All right? So all I'm saying is you're gonna have to get this transparency thing, because I think there's a lot of transparency now. I think that there's obfuscation. I think when you go down and you say something, no offense, Madam Clerk, but you ask for something, you got to go through a public records request. What kind of bullshit is that? If you're asking for something that it's public record, why do you have to put in a request? It's public record, okay? So I think the idea is sound. I don't think it belongs in the charter. That's just my opinion. But I do think that transparency is very important. I don't think telling a city manager how his departments are not doing their job is our job. I think that's the city council's job. And the people who don't get their stop sign or don't get their speed bump or don't like what they're talked to, how they're talked to, they get their say so, but you can't have a system that affects somebody's performance based on, I mean, we're witnessing it now in our society where our policemen are not doing police work. Okay? I mean, I'm not making a political statement here, although it may sound like it is. My point is everybody's in a protection mode. And that's what you're trying to do is say, well, I don't mean you personally. I shouldn't have said that. What this kind of a measure does is make people think about how it's going to affect them before they do their job. And if I want a guy to fill a pothole, I really don't care how he puts the asphalt in the street. And I care if he puts it in there and he packs it down and it sets up right. And the suspension on my truck isn't damaged by it. Okay, that's what I care about. All right, so that's not a metric, though. I mean, that isn't something that you can say to somebody, this is how we're gonna judge you. Basically, at the end of the day, is everybody happy? And if they're not, why not? And what can we do to make it better? And that's but that's not our job. Or I don't mean our job, the city's job. Okay, the city's job is to perform as the city council and the electorate want them to perform, and that's how the system works. Unfortunately, So that's all I got to say about this. I think transparency is dreadfully important, but I don't think that this is going to do it, especially in the charter.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's been my direction from the beginning of this, is I don't see this as being appropriately placed in the charter.
No, well,
It can be accomplished.
I don't see how it works in the charter.
Neither do I.
Effectively. You could
Well,
put it
no,
in there, it's never going to be
When you say effectively, again, that's another word that, my point is,
the modality of the effectiveness
with its metrics, I got it.
with the correct metrics.
Okay, so,
Joe's head is spinning.
yeah. So anyway, yeah, I'm getting dizzy. But so, anyway. No, I just don't think that this is, but again, if you want to wordsmith the transparency issue there, or participation, I'm all in on that one. I mean, in other words, But people have the podium sits right there. I mean, we even adjust the podium, goes up and down, up and down. I mean, how much more accommodation do you need? Like I said, my issue really isn't, and if anybody ever points to the city of LA and says, well, gee, I don't use the word sewer a lot, but we put in a sewer tax here. We have our own sewer department. It works great. The city of Los Angeles is a sewer. Okay. Another way. I don't mean that to be detrimental. However, I challenge anybody to tell me that it's not. Okay. So, all I'm saying is, how do you judge that? I mean, I'm sure there are thousands, about hundreds of thousands of people in the city of Los Angeles who are looking for that metric. They're looking for that I'll just say,
Magic bullet.
yeah, they're looking for how do I get my Yelp review noticed? All right. So that's really what it is.
Comments from any other members?
Nope. I agree with what Bob was saying.
I think I have a good enough system now. I think it has too much bureaucracy putting in the charter. I think.
Can I just ask how you use sewer in not a detrimental sense? Did you use sewer as in the best possible?
Well, I don't mean
The modality of the sewer and the
You weren't
metrics
here when we
apply.
put in the potty tax here. And I'm dead set against taxes. But that was one of the best things we did, okay? That's how I use sewer, okay?
Okay.
What works for the people, and how did we rebuild the sewer system without really
We had wood
taxing
line,
them to death?
we had wood line sewers.
Yeah.
Back to the landing ground here. Ms. Morocco, I'm not feeling from the rest of the members support for moving this forward. I do appreciate the concept. Absolutely. I think we are meeting it in many ways. Was there?
No, I was just going to say, I see the need for this sort of knowledge and information. I don't see it as something that should be in the charter. It's something that the city manager should be doing.
And it's something that's to some extent happening already, and to some extent even further being explored to continue on an ongoing basis.
If I could add one thing to this, there will be a new city website that's being built. I was involved in that business for many, many years. Some states have much higher levels of transparency. Florida is one of the most transparent in terms of public documents and the ability to get it. And it should behoove the developer of the city website to build these kinds of dashboards that provide some level of review and metrics, because it exists. It's available. It is what these websites have grown to be. For example, Joe's request about public records, many of those public records are on good websites. And I think that the new website that we have with the city will be able to do that, because the company that got chosen has that specialty in them. So I think that some of what you're looking for will be coming through in this revision of the web capability.
But again, you're. I don't mean to get it down in the weeds with semantics here, but transparency is the ability to get something. It can be obfuscated by a system, but
Yes, it can.
and it is oftentimes, and I even understand the reason why it is, but that doesn't mean that it's available, transparent, because it's a public document. You can actually take them to court and sue them if you wanted to do that, and get it, and probably get attorney's fees for it. But that's not transparency. That's process. Mm-hmm. So I mean, transparency is, that's a top secret document, and you're never going to see it.
You spend a lot of time in an area without.
Yes, I did. I'm sorry. I don't mean to get personal again. Yes, I did.
So certainly something that could be taken up with commissions. And it's already, as you mentioned, the new website is going to have the Public Works dashboard on it, I believe. I don't know if that's been enabled yet or when that's coming, but all the projects that are going.
Yes.
To see, so residents can see the status of my street is coming up, but not for another year kind of thing. So that's being put out there. There is definitely
Then you
efforts
get
towards.
public participation. if it's not for another year. No, nobody likes to hear that.
Any other Zoom or e-comments?
No comments.
Is Eugene still on? Does he have anything to wrap up with or
He's still on.
allow him?
No, I'm fine. Thank you for asking.
Okay, yeah, I can allow you
We
that.
miss you, Gene.
Thank you.
At least they got public participation.
From the city treasurer.
Something.
Okay, so there is no motion to continue this. That will be,
End of it.
that'll take care of that. I appreciate you bringing it forward.
No
It was
problem.
a good
Until the
discussion.
next
It was a
one
good discussion.
coming up.
Moving on then to J3, discussion of possible action regarding reviewing sections of the charter and anywhere that mentions any derivative of the word publish. The sections area are as follows. I won't read those out, but Madam Clerk, your name is on this.
Yes. So I think I was part that brought this information, mostly related to the ordinances that are published in the paper, especially the building changes, and then also related to legal notices or our contract that we have to have every year. So, and then the commission or the committee asked that we bring everything that says published, because if we're going to change publish somewhere, maybe it should go all the way across the board in a sense of the newspaper, since, you know, newspapers are starting to dwindle down. And I think that's something we might need to look at. I don't know if it's now or later. The one thing we did do is we reached out to some of our neighboring cities because we are no longer a member of the League of California Cities. So we have a listserv that we normally reach out to all the cities in California. And so we weren't able to do that. So we just called around the cities and we found out that for legal ads, nobody has contracts. So they just don't have contracts. They just, I guess, contact the paper and say, we want to put a legal ad in, and they just pay whatever that price is. Where we have a contract each year per the charter. And I even put in the ballot measure that actually originally was in the charter in 1949. And then it went to the voters to change one word or to remove published, one of the published words in that section. And that was it. And then that was that area. And then we also asked the neighboring cities regarding the ordinances, and they do publish that, but they publish the summary of the building code changes. And that's it. And so in all these sections.
Definition of publish is.
Right.
What does publish mean?
Well, what are the legal requirements? Aren't there a number of legal requirements? Because it's got to be a paper that has a circulation above a certain amount and.
It just says general circulation.
General circulation, but it has to be a local.
Section 19.5 is the thing that she's looking at.
Well, and so this is more to our city attorney. Does the state have any publishing requirements?
I mean, as to how many days things have to be published. So what this was initially, the 19.5 required that it actually physically be published in the city. And there were none there was an old one, and I think it was the Redondo Beach News that was then purchased by the Easy Reader. And so therefore, they were the only entity that could be contracted to be the official publication for the city. And you could argue that you didn't get the best rates, but the charter mandated that it be published in Redondo. So that's why the amendment went through, so that all of a sudden you could apply to the Daily Breeze, the Beach Reporter, the Easy Reader, and it's changed. It's gone back and forth to the lowest bidder, and they had different competing, fonts and how much it would cost and different types of ad would cost different amounts. So that was essentially the ballot measure the last time it was changed. And so I think what the clerk is saying is, do you want to have 19.5's requirement that there be an official publication for the city that you'd have to go to for all items that have to be published?
That's what gave me that.
Is there a prohibition against electronic publishing? In other words, could you put it on the website?
But we do have it on the website.
Okay, so.
What's required by state,
Yeah, that's
basically?
I'm sorry?
Is there a state requirement?
That's what I'm
for this?
asking.
Yeah.
That's my
Yeah.
question. Is there?
And
I haven't looked at it. I haven't been asked to look at it. I'll certainly look at that. If you're saying, hey, we want to get rid of 19.5, not just so the first point is, do we want to get rid of so if you look at 19.5, the newspaper with which any such contract is made shall be designated as the official
Right.
newspaper for publication, the second sentence.
Right.
And
Ron and I are not able to
Why
click through
can't we
to get
just
to that.
wordsmith that?
I printed
So-
mine out.
well, that's what, like, if you're asking me, you want to get rid of that, or, hey, do we need to have it published in a paper of general circulation? I don't know, because I haven't been asked to look at it. Has the state law changed enough that it no longer needs to be? I suspect, go ahead, you look like.
No, I think I mentioned this to you when I was asking, why do we need it posted on bulletin boards outside City Hall when we should be publishing and putting something in our charter saying it should be on the city's website? Or bring this at least into the 21st century
Well, that,
for
see, that's
legal notices.
Yeah, it depends. Like, for example, the Brown Act has specific requirements of where you post it. And if you have a website, then you have to put it on your website. If you were some city that didn't have, you don't have to post.
But it still has to be physically posted.
Right. And so if the committee wants, then I'll look at what the options are allowed under state law. And then you can decide if you want to go through 19, if you want to, minimize it. I suspect there's still a requirement because the other cities are still publishing in papers of general circulation, but I don't want to pine. But my guess is they wouldn't be doing that necessarily if they didn't have to. And
Well, that's not true.
well,
I went through the wars on that.
so
We've been through this.
yeah, it could. That's what I suspect, because I think someone would try and
That's
say.
not true. That's all I'm going to say.
But I think the thing that makes us different, what the clerk was discussing, is we have to have an official newspaper. And based on her review of the other cities don't have an official newspaper. Chair, Committee Member Pinsler has.
The issue for me is putting it into the newspaper is one thing. It's sort of like putting the posting outside of the library, which you're required to do as well. It's where else do you put it? I mean, if you say, oh, if I only put it in the newspaper, then that'll be fine because nobody will actually read it, which is sort of what exists. It's particularly true in the bidding room. The people who are bidding aren't looking at the local newspapers.
But
They want it posted somewhere else. So the issue here is not just should it be in general interest publications, but where else do you require it to be? And it should be on your website. It should be in bulletin boards for professional organizations, whatever it might be. That should be required rather than make the option of maybe we really want to hide this and tell Joe down the street that go look at the newspaper because there's going to be a bid in there for you, but nobody else is going to see it.
I'll give you an example where it was helpful. When the AES property went up for foreclosure, the only way I could find out what exactly was up for foreclosure was in the Easy Reader, where they published it as required by law. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't us. So I just want to know what that is very helpful to me to look at. Okay, you have to do at least this. And then the clerk can find out what other cities do that expand that. And then you can see if you want to require that in the charter.
Can I ask what are being done with DBAs? Because that used to be, you had to be in a newspaper, but I think it's expanded beyond that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe not, I don't know.
I don't know either. I haven't looked at
Okay,
it. So
I
it
want to
just,
make a motion. Let's ask him to research it, bring it back to us, and same with the clerk. Tell us about this publishing.
but if you can, we'll look at what's required. If you
Yes.
can look at what more do other cities do?
Right.
And then what are you trying to
And
get
also,
rid
if
of?
I can, where do they require it? Because you may not want to put it in the charter to, mandate a certain thing that no longer,
Like newspapers.
yeah.
The word publishing has connotations to it.
Right.
That maybe we don't want to have, but there needs to be something else that replaces publishing.
And this
So
would be
what are
one-
we trying to get rid of or replace in the word?
Not, we're trying to understand.
But the goal is to eventually get
First,
rid
we
of
got to
something
understand
or
before we get
modify
a
something.
goal on this.
I think what the clerk was bringing in was the specific question of, has the day passed where we need to have a contract with one particular official publisher? That was understood
One.
what she was bringing to you and what other cities don't have. This
our
can
contract.
expand to what's the minimum, what other things, and what do we want to put in the charter? But her specific question is, do we still need to have one official publisher for all notices?
But we don't know whether or not that's required somewhere else. Why is that in the charter? I mean, another question, I can make my own guess, but.
There's a story behind everything.
Yeah, exactly.
may have gone
My
away.
point is 19.5.
Wasn't the rundown
says
of
newspaper.
reflex, wasn't that the name of it?
It may have gone away elsewhere.
Yes,
And we just need to,
exactly,
and that's
yes.
what we're looking for. What do we need to get rid of in here and not violate state law?
And this is one of those where you actually can take advantage of our fact that we have an assembly member and see if they'll propose something that's consistent with what we want. Because who knows, they can change the law just as easily and deal with it.
Well, but first you have to figure out what the committee wants. Do you want, okay, we can, for convenience, because it can be hard. The council wants to do something, and the city manager wants to propose something that the council wants them to do, and all of a sudden we can't get it we can't get it published within the time frame. So you have to be careful, because if you put a lot of restrictions, then things may not get done that the council would otherwise want to do. At the other end, if you only put it in newspaper, then a lot of people are going to be mad that something gets passed that they didn't know about.
Most of you probably know that I have a very close relationship with someone who worked with an elected official for a long time. And the first thing she would ask is, what would you like the assembly member to do? What would you like her to do? And we need to do that if we're going to be talking for law changes.
So personally, I think there's value in having a mandated single place so you can go to find all notices and bids and whatever else, whatever that may be. I think it would be great if it was the webpage. If the law says that, whether it needs to be in the charter is a great question. And if I was going to ask an assembly member to come up with a bill, because I don't know what the law is now, I would ask that be given an option to cities as a noticing, a way to fulfill your legal requirements for noticing, to publish it in a page or space or whatever on the city's webpage. That brings us a little bit more into the 21st century, saves paper, a way that talk about transparency. That's a way everybody can go, you know that all your notices are going to be on the webpage. That's a place everybody can go look. Now,
The problem is that probably we're not there yet, because the answer is not everybody has access to
Needs to be
computer.
duplicate.
Yeah, and so like you can,
I've heard this argument before. I still haven't met that person.
one of the few members of the audience that you have is a gentleman that doesn't have
well,
access
so
to.
you do have
library,
terminals in a
which does have
library.
access.
That is true.
the one thing I didn't see in here is the elections. So do the elections have specific publication rules that we
There
still
are
have to follow?
some, but there are, majority of them are actually posted on the outside. So there's not, some of the posting is not required in the paper. There's specific, a couple of them, but that's it.
So
Copy that.
the clerk did a search in the charter for publish, and you see the different sections that, and so go through those. The last one from 27.5, it's not something we published. It refers to a study that's published, like the standard that you have to meet. So that 27.5 is the one that doesn't apply, but everything else, you can get a sense of what there's a requirement in the charter to publish.
When the general plan goes before the voters, will it be required to be printed in full in a newspaper?
Yes, and that was another question. I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, and also it'll be required to be published. The election, Article 27 will apply to that, and it has its own specific requirements of what has to, so the publication for something that has to be run pursuant to Article 27 is much more expensive pursuant to state law. And so they all go together. And so that's why I want to, research it if that's what the committee is asking to do.
My motion.
And then, give you, this is the minimum. The clerk can give you, this is what other cities do. And then you can sort through it, see what you want to do, and then what's appropriate for a charter section.
Do you need a second?
I do.
Second.
Public comment.
Hold on. Nope. None. For the
Out
record.
of that time. Just real quick before we proceed to that, but Eleanor, it sounded like one of the key things you were looking to address was this contract issue.
Correct.
Were there other critical things that we should be looking for as we read through this, or is it just a general look
It
over?
was just, yeah, and the word published, I mean, that sort of encompasses everything. So that's great. And then actually Bob brought up a good question regarding it's actually the sample ballot material that we have to provide to all the voters, a pamphlet that includes all the zoning changes.
And the traffic analysis, I believe, is in there.
Yeah, everything.
Two different traffic
It's going to be a
analysis.
tome that will come to people's houses.
Yep.
And,
Yes.
and that's a very good situation where not having to make it electronic would be great. The other thing about voting is that since the law was changed where everybody receives a ballot, it seems that that duplication is going to be expensive and non-productive to have to go and print it. Maybe the Easy Reader is going to be 500 pages long for that week, if that's the newspaper you go with.
That's 495 pages more than it is now.
Well, that's true, but
We don't-
he's going to do very well that week.
That part we don't post in the paper. And so, but it's just that all voters get the book.
Get the book.
With the ballot.
Yeah,
So
and that makes
it's
sense.
Very
But-
Well,
expensive.
the change from the 30s, because the 30s used to send out those notices to the newspaper. So there's somewhere in there, there's a change as well that would probably address what you just brought up.
We've hit the key next steps are to get what are the legal minimums, what are other ones around us doing, as for just for comparative purposes. And what was your motion, Joe?
Have the city attorney research it and have the city clerk opine on what publish means, actually, I guess.
What other cities are doing, and also,
Well, the word publish could be, we put it on the internet. I mean, that's, that's,
Okay.
I mean, does that suffice?
We're going to get that from.
Yes.
Okay.
right, that's,
In the context of
That
the
may-
state requirements, I'll
That
tell
may
you.
mean changing the charter to define publish.
Yes.
It could, or it may be, there's a state requirement and that in And we've always
May be
interpreted
different for
it.
different things.
Right, exactly.
If during your research, if you could check to see if there's anything in the works going on now at the state legislature,
Or anything that might be.
because
Yep.
bills are going through their second readings by this point, but they don't become law. The signing period is until the end of the session, which is August. We would hate to go through this and have to change everything again.
Yeah, and I'm not certain they necessarily would have gone through both houses yet.
Not yet, no.
Yeah, so, but we'll know, it was proposed and didn't make it through the assembly, then we don't need to take it into account. If
There
it
may be
passed,
something.
then we
Probably
should
not
take a
even on
look
their
at it.
radar at this point.
Yes, you're right.
Probably not.
Workable.
Can
We
you
need
do,
to continue this to somewhere.
yeah, I'd say July, because we've got stuff to do and June is budget month.
Yep.
It's hard to get.
That is hard.
Joe, will you accept a friendly member to continue this
I will.
to July
I will.
with those two items? Okay, so there is a motion, the seconder accepts that as well. Mr. Kilroy?
Yes, sorry.
So we will continue this to the July regular meeting is the motion with the input from both the city attorney on state required minimums or any other pending legislation currently. And the city clerk will bring back examples of local cities as to what they do.
They're doing.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Moving on to J4, if anyone have any future agenda topics they wish to add, except for Mr. Morocco.
I don't even know if this would rank up there, but somebody was mentioning at the last council meeting I was at that maybe having something in the charter that discusses cannabis regulation. Because apparently that may be something we can actually control in the community more. But I'm not advocating it. I'm just throwing it out there that I heard that. So
I think that's what ordinances are for.
That's what ordinances are for, right?
Yeah, that's a
No,
dynamic
just
thing
one
too.
minute.
The process of getting something into the charter, it could change by the time, one of the things that we found is how archaic some of the things that are in here are
Right.
just stuck there because you have to go through this process of voting and getting it out.
And we've already experienced a lot of changes in the cannabis world, so that law is constantly evolving.
So I'm not advocating it.
No, I
I'm just
appreciate that,
saying it.
bringing that
Just
forward, yeah.
something.
Anyone else with future agenda topics?
Not exactly a future agenda topic, but I apologize. I will be out of the country on June 25th.
It's 22nd, sorry.
So either way, I won't be
Either way,
back to the
okay.
28th.
Going anywhere good?
Yeah. Amsterdam, Brussels, bike tour.
Do you have an
You
alternate?
can find out what they're doing about that
Do I have
cannabis.
an alternate for the trip or an alternate for,
Is there an alternate for this?
There's not, but that's okay. We don't have to.
Did both of them decide not to continue?
Yeah, I was going to ask that question.
Yeah.
What happened there?
What happened with the,
We now have Matt. I'm happy to have him.
And we have
Well, we
Jerry.
did have two. Yeah, well,
we had-
he's been a part of the gang for a
And
while.
that's what happened so far.
yeah, we had Norma and we.
Yeah, we had, yeah.
She resigned.
I thought they were switching.
They
to
both,
the-
yeah,
I
that's
think
what
we
I
can
thought.
ask that outside of this, but
They both resigned.
Okay.
Okay. This is
Thought I'd
part of that
run after that
transparency thing, dude.
all my information secondhand. So
Okay. All right. Like I said, this is part of that transparency. You want transparency?
It's actually in the minutes or resignation
Okay.
of the council.
Okay.
any others?
That's what I said. Go ahead.
Okay.
No, we're good.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed? Meeting is adjourned.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Help out with 2 phones, work phone, personal phones, is very helpful.
Good
job. Keep life apart before having everything.
So Eleanor,